Kanaz Sea Beach. Given Leon's legendary lack of direction, Johan wasn't the least bit surprised when the academy headmaster quickly arranged for someone to pick him up. That decision, small as it seemed, gave Johan back something truly precious: his relaxation time, which he cleverly labeled as training. Meanwhile, Leon, en route to the academy, dialed his old mentor. "Yo, Lil Leon," came Mustard's cheerful voice, fingers flying across a game controller on the Isle of Armor. "Didn't expect a call this early. What's up?" "I met Johan Sensei today," Leon replied, serious as ever. "Oh," Mustard chuckled knowingly. He didn't need to guess twice. Leon definitely tried to battle him. "I lost," Leon admitted, voice dropping. "Badly. The gap between us was massive." Even though Johan had claimed that the EV wasn't his, Leon couldn't shake the feeling. That battle was no fluke. Mustard paused his game. Leon wasn't the type to exaggerate. For him to so openly admit defeat. "He's that strong," Mustard murmured, pushing back his chair and rising to his feet. Excitement sparked in his eyes. "Yeah," Leon said with admiration. "And it's not just power. His bond with his Pokémon is deep. It's like he raises each of them like family. He only has 4 Pokémon, but they're trained to perfection." "Only 4, huh?" It wasn't unheard of. Some elite trainers focused on a small, hand-picked team, but to reach Johan's level with such a tight-knit squad was rare. "Oh, and Master," Leon added. "Johan Sensei accepted your invitation." That got a grin out of Mustard. Good, good. Tell him to drop by soon." "Oh well, Mustard's been bored out of his mind over here." Back at the beachfront cafe, Johan sneezed. "Oh, weird. Sea breeze shouldn't get to me," he muttered, rubbing his nose. With his resistance, he could probably sleep in a snowstorm and wake up toasty. Meow. Mew purred contentedly as it spun the little music box Johan had picked out. A porcelain Vulpix figure danced atop it as a soft melody played. It adored the trinket. Johan had ended up buying 3 more from the beach stalls just to keep Mew occupied. Later, Johan took his team to the supermarket to restock supplies. Snacks, ingredients, drinks. That's when he noticed it. Mew had definitely put on some weight. The moment they returned home, Mew collapsed onto the couch, popped open a soda bottle twice its size, and started chugging. Its belly ballooned out like a machi, until it let out a loud, satisfied burp and deflated again. "Pick meow." Johan facepalmed. He'd created a sofa goblin. It was undeniably adorable. But if Mew met Mewtwo looking like this, that'd require serious PR management. He also made a mental note to keep Vulpix and the others from picking up any bad habits. Around Vulpix would look less like a fox and more like a Glamo with identity issues. That night, dinner was a feast. Mew practically rolled across the floor from how full it was, its face glowing with joy. To walk off the meal, Johan took the gang on an evening stroll along the riverside. As they arrived, the soft hum of the river mixed with the flickering glow of fireflies, an enchanting sight that left everyone speechless. Except Mew. Mew had seen fireflies around the World Tree and floated calmly, soaking in the nostalgic scene. Kaka. Jengar, however, had other plans. With gleeful glee, it dove into the swarm of fireflies, gobbling them up like glowing jelly beans. Tinkatuff and Dragonair tilted their heads in confusion, watching Jengar devour bug after bug. Moments later, with cheeks puffed and belly glowing faintly from bioluminescent bugs, Jengar struck a victory pose, sunglasses on, glowing like a walking lava lamp. The others burst out laughing. Mew rolled on the grass, clutching its sides. "Mio, mio, mo." Johan, trying to suppress his own grin, cleared his throat. "Ahem. Jengar, where I'm from, there's a saying, fireflies feed on rot and decay." Jengar froze mid-pose. "Kaka. Sigma, LLL." A long, anguished wail followed. One by one, the fireflies were spat back out in a stream of sparkles and regret, triggering another round of uncontrollable laughter from the team. The next morning, Johan awoke to find Mew gone. He wasn't surprised. As much as it enjoyed these visits, its bond with the World Tree would always pull it back. Still, he hoped he'd made it stay worthwhile. Later that day, his phone rang. "Johan, The headmaster boomed over the line. I heard you accepted Mustard's invitation. Kind of, Johan replied, rubbing the back of his neck. Excellent. We've already booked your first-class ticket to Gaylor. First class. Don't worry about the cost. It's covered. The Academy supports international collaboration. Great for professional development and all that. Johan blinked as he ended the call. Free travel, fully funded? Maybe he could even grab a Dynamax band while he was there and write it off as a teaching expense. Arrival, Winden City, Gaylor. The plane descended smoothly over Winden, its vast skyline rising in the morning light. Towering skyscrapers, neon-lit billboards, and the unmistakable buzz of a city that never slept. It almost rivaled Rustboro in scale. Johan stepped out of the airport, suitcase in hand. Suddenly, a loud screech. A jeep tore around the corner, tires smoking as it drifted across 2 lanes and roared straight toward him. Johan didn't move. Let me guess. He sighed. Leon sent a welcome committee. Crash. With a final screech of tortured tires, a pink jeep skidded sideways and slammed into a roadside guardrail. A chorus of gasps rose from stunned onlookers. From a driver's seat staggered a young woman with fiery orange ponytails, fashionable glasses perched above her forehead, and a chic brown coat fluttering around her knees. Her makeup was flawless, her entrance not so much. "Johan Sensei," she called, hurrying over with wobbly steps. Johan blinked. "Sonia." She stopped in her tracks, eyes wide. "Wait, you know who I am? You're Leon's childhood friend. You show me your picture." Her pale cheeks turned pink. "He did. So Leon keeps her photo on his phone. Interesting." Johan gently redirected the conversation. "What brings you all the way out here?" Shaking herself out of her flustered daze, Sonia stood tall. "Leon said it's your first time in Gaylor, and you might not know your way around. He mentioned it to my gran, so she sent me to greet you. Oh, by the way, my grandmother is Professor Magnolia." Of course she is, Johan thought. But why go through Magnolia instead of just calling me? Anyway, Sonia said brightly, pointing at the mangled jeep. "Hop in." Johan stared at the dented vehicle. The guardrail still trembled from the impact. He had heard tales. In Gaylor, 2 names were legendary for travel disasters. The first was Leon, who once got lost inside a Pokémon Center. The second was Sonia, the cheerful, road hazard in heels whose driving was described as evolution-inducing by terrified passengers. Together, the childhood friends were a walking, drifting, spinning natural disaster. Johan rubbed his chin. "Maybe I should drive." Sonia tilted her head, puzzled. Well," Johan offered with a diplomatic smile. "Experiencing Gaylor's roads firsthand might help me understand the culture better." "That actually makes sense," Sonia admitted, handing over the keys. She slid into the passenger seat, cuddling her yamper as Johan gently buckled in his Vulpix and took the wheel. Sonia leaned over, eyes sparkling. "Your Vulpix is adorable. Ice type, right?" The little fox squirmed uncomfortably as Sonia tugged at its fluffy ears. "Oh." It turned to Johan with a look that screamed, "Save me," but Sonia was already fawning like a fangirl. Even Yamper was charmed. It leapt down from Sonia's lap, tail wagging in overdrive as it sniffed Vulpix curiously. "Yamper, wanna play?" "Oh, maybe later." Before things could get cozy, Jengar phased in from the shadows of the back seat, tongue hanging out, eyes gleaming mischievously. "Kaka, I'm thirsty." Yamper froze. Then with a stiff-legged twitch, it toppled over like a fainting goat, foaming at the mouth. "Yamper!" Sonia gasped. Johan sighed, already rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Jengar." Jengar scratched its head. "Too scary." Vulpix gently blew a puff of icy air over Yamper, who twitched, hiccuped, then sprang back to life, still trembling but functional. "Why, you're a very calm driver, Johan Sensei," Sonia remarked as they finally hit the road. Translation: Johan drove like a cautious grandfather, which said a lot about her usual speed. "Where to exactly?" Johan asked. Sonia hummed and pulled out a folded map from the glove compartment. She studied it closely. Johan glanced over. "You're holding it upside down." "Whoa. Aha. Oops. Figures." Leon and Sonia were definitely cut from the same cloth. Johan opened his Pokédex and activated its GPS. We'll let technology guide us. A Pokédex? Sonia blinked. Didn't know they had GPS features. This one's from Professor Oak. Gifted, not stolen. Their destination was ultimately the Isle of Armor, but Johan made a quick detour to Wyndon's largest shopping mall. You don't show up empty-handed, he explained. Jengar trailed behind, tossing full restores, max potions, and revives into the cart. 50 of each should do. What? They're out of stock already? Fine, take what's left. With her shopping bags in tow, Sonia led Johan to the headquarters of Galer's flying taxi service, flown primarily by Corviknight. Thanks to her connections, they were greeted by a seasoned pilot bundled in a thick coat, goggles, and wool hat. Is this the young man I'm picking up? He asked with a warm smile. That's him, Sonia confirmed with a bow. Please take care of him. Of course. He stepped away to check on his Corviknight. Johan-sensei, Sonia said quietly. He turned. Her voice had a tremble he hadn't heard before. I want to study in Hoenn. Johan raised an eyebrow. Hoenn, Sonia nodded earnestly. Kabu told me so much about it. I want to grow, learn more, see the world beyond Galer. And she hesitated. I want to study under you. Johan blinked. Sonia's determination was no joke. She wanted change, challenge, and mentorship. And your grandmother's okay with that? She's all for it. Sonia said brightly. She said it's about time I found my own path. Johan nodded. Then you're welcome at Rustboro Academy anytime. Another win. And Martin owed him lunch for this recruit. Suddenly, a massive whoosh filled the sky. A colossal Corviknight descended, clutching a large, old-fashioned taxi carriage in its talons. The pilot waved. All set. Ready for liftoff. Johan smiled, until he felt the luxury ball on his belt tremble. In a flash of red, Tinkatuff materialized, hammer in hand, eyes locked on a Corviknight. Its pupils gleamed with primal, competitive fire. Wordlessly, it picked up a nearby rock, tossed it into the air. Wham! With a thunderous swing, it slammed the rock with deadly precision, launching it skyward like a cannonball. Corviknight shrieked and flared its wings, dodging at the last second. Johan sighed, watching the inevitable unfold. The sky trembled. The air crackled with tension. Tinkatuff versus Corviknight. The battle for the skies had officially begun.
Hey, everyone! If you enjoy my quantum audiobooks, you can support me by becoming a Patreon member. Your support helps me keep creating, and you'll get exclusive perks. You can also access my audiobooks directly through Google Drive. Check out the link in the description. Now, let's get started.
Mountains, rivers, towns, and plains swept past the horizon, blurring into one mesmerizing panorama. Calm down, or we're going to fall out of the sky, Johan said, gripping Tinkatuff's arm tightly. Choo-choo. Tinkatuff had finally settled down, its earlier frenzy subsiding. Despite being on a flying taxi, its competitive spirit was unshaken. It had discovered something infuriating. This Corviknight, carrying the flying taxi, was fast. Too fast. The stones Tinkatuff had flung had missed completely. Defeated, it resigned itself to sitting still, hammer in hand. Chew! It muttered under its breath, gripping its hammer tighter. It needed to become stronger. Meanwhile, the Corviknight hauling the taxi seemed to heave a sigh of relief. Close call. Now it understood why its cousins in the Paldea region often looked so miserable. Tinkatuff's small, adorable, pink appearance was deceptive. The rocks hurled by its hammer were no joke. Corviknight shuddered. If one of those stones had hit its wing, it might have shed feathers. And if it had struck its head, well, the thought was too grim to entertain. The driver, however, remained impressively calm, betraying no hint of alarm. He seemed to be well-versed in the complicated relationship between Tinkatuff and Pokémon like Corviknight. In their earlier stages, Tinkatink often became targets for metal-loving Pokémon like Corviknight and Bisharp, drawn to their crude, metallic hammers. But as Tinkatink evolved into Tinkatuff and sought stronger materials to craft larger hammers, they'd turn the tables, attacking Bisharp clans to scavenge metal. By the time they became Tinkaton, they often took aim at flying Corviknight for the same reason. This rivalry was so infamous that in Paldea, the flying taxi service exclusively used smaller, faster Pokémon like Squawkabilly instead of Corviknight. It wasn't hard to imagine why. Luckily, Johan's Tinkatuff was strong, too strong. If this Corviknight hadn't been skilled, it might have ended up grounded and plucked bald. After what felt like an eternity, the driver called out, "We're almost there." Ahead, a sprawling island came into view. The Isle of Armor. The island's size was impressive, featuring forests, wetlands, dunes, caves, and a variety of wild Pokémon habitats. Without adequate strength, wandering freely here could be perilous. Kaka. Jengar, perched against the window, pointed to the island. Two towering structures loomed in the distance, one to the east and the other to the west. Approaching from the west, the western tower was more visible. From afar, the sound of rushing water could be faintly heard. The eastern tower, shrouded in black mist, was less distinct. The driver chuckled, noticing Johan's curiosity. Those are the towers of two fists. The western one is the Tower of Waters, and the eastern one is the Tower of Darkness. Each teaches a different martial art. The Tower of Waters practices the rapid strike style, focusing on seamless, continuous attacks like flowing water or crashing waves, with each strike more powerful than the last. The Tower of Darkness emphasizes the single strike style, favoring devastating, one-hit blows that end battles in an instant. Chew. Tinkatuff's eyes gleamed as it pointed toward the Tower of Darkness. Johan gave a small nod of understanding. The renowned elite four-member Bruno had once suggested that Tinkatuff might benefit from studying the single-strike style. Johan, too, was familiar with the towers. Each corresponded to a specific evolution for Kubfu, either the rapid strike Urshifu from the Tower of Waters or the single strike Urshifu from the Tower of Darkness. Urshifu was one of Mustard's signature Pokémon. Of course, Leon, Mustard's protege, hadn't inherited his master's martial expertise. Rumor had it Leon once got lost trying to find towers with his Kubfu, derailing the entire training process. Classic Leon. Kaka. Jengar suddenly produced its phone, swiping to a picture of a younger Mustard. In the photo, Mustard stood proudly with two imposing Urshifu, one on either side. Uwu. The other Pokémon crowded around, expressions serious. Chew. Tinkatuff muttered, seemingly impressed by the strength the Urshifu radiated. "They're just bare paws," Johan joked. The Pokémon turned to him with expressions that could only be described as judgmental. "Really? You're making food jokes right now?" "We're landing soon," the driver announced as Corviknight descended toward a dojo-like building below. The Isle of Armor, Mustard's dojo. Under a clear blue sky, Corviknight flapped its wings, landing smoothly on the sandy shore. Ahead lay dense forests and rolling hills, while behind them stretched the open ocean, where a dreadnought emerged from the water with a menacing growl. After the driver passed along his contact number, he quickly departed, clearly eager to leave the island as soon as possible. Chew. Tinkatuff watched the retreating Corviknight with mild annoyance, grumbling about missed opportunities to test its hammer. Johan surveyed the surroundings thoughtfully. Not bad. An entire island as a personal training ground. No wonder Mustard, with his undefeated 18-year championship streak, was so accomplished. Maybe one day, Johan mused he'd buy his own island. A peaceful place to raise his Pokémon, complete with a cozy little house, and maybe even a partner to share it with. The creak of the dojo door interrupted his daydream. A woman in a bright green sweater, her makeup flawless, emerged, broom in hand. "Are you Johan Sensei?" she asked with a warm smile. Honey, Mustard's younger wife and the dojo's co-founder, Honey was as sharp as she was charming. She managed the dojo alongside Mustard, balancing practicality with a touch of flair. "Perfect weather for laundry, isn't it?" she remarked, shielding her eyes from the sun. Johan returned the smile. "You must be Honey. I see Mustard is a lucky man." "Flatterer." Honey giggled, visibly pleased. "You're much smoother than Leon. Mustard's inside, probably gaming again. I'll take you to him. Thanks for the trouble." As they entered the dojo, Passing through a serene garden, they reached a central hall. Inside, an older man with flowing white brows and a lively green jacket sat on a sofa, engrossed in a video game. "Sorry about this," Honey said apologetically. "Mustard loses himself in games sometimes. But don't worry, it looks like he's about to lose anyway." Sure enough, the words "game over" flashed across the screen moments later. "Welcome, welcome," Mustard said cheerfully, finally noticing his guests. "Little Johan." Johan froze. "Little Johan?" He fought the urge to wince at the nickname. "Yes, Mustard Sensei." "Huh, you made good time." "Not really." His principal had practically launched him onto a plane overnight. "Come on, I'll show you some Pokémon," Mustard said suddenly, clapping his hands. "Pokémon?" Johan repeated, confused. "This wasn't part of the plan." "Yup, I heard you only have 4 so far, right? You might find one of mine to your liking." "Wait, I'm just here to train my Tinkatuff." But Mustard didn't seem to hear, leading Johan toward the back of the dojo. "You'll need to pass a test to earn one, though," Mustard added with a grin. "A test?" Johan relaxed slightly. "Good. If he failed, he wouldn't have to take one home." When they reached an open courtyard, Mustard turned, releasing 2 Pokémon onto the field. A tiny Rookidee and a Rockruff appeared, both looking timid and inexperienced. Johan's jaw dropped. Noticing the eagerness in his Pokémon, he muttered in disbelief. "Wait, you're holding back from me. What kind of Pokémon were so valuable that the Mustard would go this far to ensure he could catch one?" Suddenly, Johan's hopes of failure didn't seem so secure. A breeze rustled through the grass, revealing a tuft of gray fur nestled among the foliage. "Omega ZZZ. Little Johan, don't underestimate them," Mustard remarked with a knowing smile, as though he'd already seen through Johan's thoughts. Johan snapped back to attention. Right? No matter how they looked, these were still Pokémon raised by Mustard, the former champion of Galar and a martial arts legend. Then, before Johan could finish, Honey, Mustard's ever-charming wife, interjected with a smile. "How about a no-holds-bar match? Both sides use 2 Pokémon each. What do you think?" "Sounds perfect to me," Mustard agreed, sliding his hands into his pockets with an air of calm confidence. "It's been a while since I've broken a sweat. Good time to get these old bones moving." Johan hesitated briefly, his expression mixed. No holds barred. Unlike unrestricted battles, which only allowed Pokémon to clash and protected trainers from direct harm, no-holds-barred matches were different. In this format, trainers and Pokémon could both engage in combat. Trainers could even directly target one another. Victory could be achieved by incapacitating both of the opponent's Pokémon or by rendering the opposing trainer unable to continue. Such matches weren't common in Galar and were almost unheard of in official circuits. But Mustard had traveled the world. It was no surprise that he'd encountered and embraced this battle style. Not only was he the former champion, but he'd also been a gym leader specializing in fighting types and was the master who trained Bee, the human Macamp herself. So this was the catch. Fighting him wouldn't get Johan killed, right? Still, perhaps this battle was meant to evaluate his Pokémon's abilities and his own capabilities as a trainer. With newfound resolve, Johan's eyes sharpened. "Oh, look at that fighting spirit, little Johan," Mustard praised, his demeanor growing more focused. Johan shouted his first command. "Tinkatuff, use Ice Hammer." Tinkatuff, who had been quietly observing from Johan's side, immediately tightened its grip on its hammer. Without hesitation, it swung the frosted weapon in a powerful arc, sending shards of ice scattering toward Mustard. Mustard, however, remained unfazed. Impressive force. This kind of raw power has incredible potential if properly refined. Even as he analyzed, his commands came swiftly and decisively. "Rookidee, brave bird." Brave bird? Johan's eyes widened in disbelief. Rookidee was Galar's humble early game starter bird. Who would bother teaching it something as demanding as brave bird? But sure enough, the small avian's body ignited with pale blue flames as it flapped its wings and launched itself directly toward Tinkatuff. And Rockruff, Stone Edge. Rockruff's claws dug into the ground, summoning sharp stone pillars in a straight line toward Johan. Johan wasn't even surprised anymore. If Rookity could pull off Brave Bird, then why not a stone edge-wielding Rockruff? Jengar, Johan commanded. Shadow Ball, Kaka. Let's go. From Johan's shadow, Jengar emerged with its signature mischievous grin. This was where Jengar truly shined. Its utility and unpredictability made it invaluable in wild fights and no-holds-barred modes. With eerie precision, Jengar conjured a dark, crackling orb and hurled it directly at the incoming pillars of rock. But then, something caught Johan's attention. This is... He glanced around at the field, his mind racing. Rookity's relentless assault, Rockruff's pinpoint strikes. This wasn't random chaos. Single strike and rapid strike styles. Johan muttered to himself. Mustard, impressed, gave a small nod. Figured it out already? The ice hammer collided with Rookity mid-dive, sending the bird flying. Even Tinkatuff paused briefly. Its hammer still held aloft. For such a small Pokemon, Rookity had unleashed a surprising amount of force. Before Tinkatuff could resume its attack, Rockruff pivoted, flinging pawfuls of sand directly into its face. Jengar, hypnosis. Johan redirected his focus. Jengar flashed toward Mustard, its spectral hands glowing hypnotically. However, Mustard simply shut his eyes and rolled forward, dodging the hypnotic waves effortlessly. Jengar pouted. If Johan hadn't forbidden its use of the Johan family hypnosis special, a deliberately overpowered version of a move, Mustard wouldn't have stood a chance. Meanwhile, Rookity, despite being thrown back, launched itself from above again, wings blazing with Brave Bird. Jengar, Shadow Ball again. Tinkatuff, focus on the stone edge. Johan barked his next set of orders. Jengar's eerie laughter echoed as it hurled twin shadowy orbs, one at Mustard and the other at Rockruff. Tinkatuff's hammer frosted over once more as it leapt into the air, smashing through the sharp rock spires Rockruff had conjured. Nice! Johan grinned as the battlefield shifted in his favor. But Mustard wasn't done yet. Dodging Jengar's first Shadow Ball with an acrobatic twist, he clapped his hands together. Rockruff, Sand Attack, and Rookity one last Brave Bird. Before Rockruff could follow through, Tinkatuff smashed its hammer down, freezing the field and cutting off any chance of another attack. Meanwhile, Jengar's second Shadow Ball hit home, knocking both Rookity and Rockruff out of the fight. It was over, or so Johan thought. Gotcha! Mustard lunged forward, grabbing the haft of Tinkatuff's hammer mid-swing. What followed could only be described as slapstick. With an audible whoosh, the small but deceptively strong Tinkatuff yanked Mustard off the ground, sending him tumbling into a nearby bush. Kaka, that's what you get. Jengar teased as the dust settled. This hammer is heavy, Mustard groaned, lying flat on his back. Victory belonged to Johan. Honey approached the scene with an amused expression. Phew, what a fight. She grabbed the hammer effortlessly, spinning it once before handing it back to a stunned Tinkatuff. Johan blinked. Wait, you can lift that. Honey just smiled. There's a reason I keep Mustard in line, you know? Chew. Tinkatuff accepted the hammer gratefully, already thinking about how to make it even heavier. Great battle, Mustard declared, dusting himself off. You've passed the test. Johan was less enthused. This test had been rigged from the start. He hadn't wanted to win, but Mustard's relentless attacks had forced his hand. Still, Johan tried to protest. Mustard-sensei, I don't just capture Pokemon on a whim. It has to feel right. Oh, don't worry about that, Mustard reassured him. Just wait until you meet the little fella I have in mind. As Mustard led the group into a dense forest, Johan's curiosity grew. There, Mustard said, pointing to a small clearing. Lying in the grass, a Pokemon snoozed peacefully. Even after all the commotion, it hadn't stirred. Johan scanned it with his Pokédex. Beep. Kubfu, the Wushu Pokemon. Known for its determination and courage, it trains diligently to become stronger. A Kubfu? The little bear rubbed its eyes groggily, noticing Johan and his Pokemon for the first time. It immediately perked up, tightening the band-like fur around its head and assuming a fighting stance. Its gaze was intense, brimming with resolve. Ku, halt. This tree is mine. Johan blinked, turning to Mustard. What did it just say? Mustard smiled slyly. It said, don't damage the trees. The gray-white fur, thick eyebrows like a martial artist's, intense eyes, and a perfect combat stance made Kupfa look like it meant business. As Mustard observed the interaction, he grinned. It seems like it's challenging you to a fight, little Johan. His voice carried a hint of nostalgia. This particular Kupfu was not an easy one to get along with. Johan stroked his chin thoughtfully. Kupfu left a favorable impression. It wasn't surprising that Mustard would offer such a Pokémon. It was a testament to his trust. Mustard wasn't the type to gift Kupfu to just anyone. Only a select few who had earned his recognition ever received one of these rare Pokémon. Even in Pokémon journeys, two formidable trainers, Chase and Asahi, hail from the Isle of Armor. Both wielded the evolved forms of Kupfu, Single Strike Style and Rapid Strike Style Urshifu. Still, Johan couldn't ignore the oddities surrounding Mustard's antics earlier. Could Kupfu have some hidden quirks? Perhaps it had an enormous appetite, or maybe it was difficult to handle in other ways. Well, Johan mused, there's only one way to find out. Tinkatuff, he called out. Chew. Tinkatuff stepped forward with a confident smile, hefting its massive hammer. It extended a hand toward Kupfu in a taunting gesture. Bring it on, little bear. Kupfu didn't flinch. Instead, it glanced at Tinkatuff's hammer and took a deep breath. Its entire body seemed to relax as it prepared to fight. It had waited a long time for a worthy challenge. This time, it was determined to observe the fight carefully and grow from the experience. Suddenly, Kupfu charged forward with incredible speed, the wind roaring in its wake. Fallen leaves scattered in its path. The sheer intensity of its presence surprised even Johan. Kupfu approached with short, calculated strides before launching a precise punch. Rock smash, Mustard declared from the sidelines, his tone light, yet brimming with pride. Such a spirited move. Johan smirked. Tinkatuff, ice hammer. Tinkatuff swung its hammer with frost gathering at the edges, meeting Kupfu's punch head-on. Boom! The collision sent shock waves rippling outward. Johan squinted, sensing something unusual. Was that aura? He could feel a distinct wave of energy emanating from Kupfu during the clash. While Kupfu itself couldn't learn Aura Sphere, its evolved form, Urshifu, certainly could. Perhaps this was a sign of its potential? The impact sent Kupfu flying backward, crashing into a nearby tree. Chew! Tinkatuff didn't pursue. Instead, it planted its hammer into the ground and nodded at Kupfu with approval. Not bad, little one. Kupfu struggled to its feet, its sharp eyes unwavering. It seemed to whisper in its aura. Even kings must fight to prove their worth. Johan raised an eyebrow. Where had Kupfu learned that line? The battle paused briefly as Johan's Pokédex beeped, revealing Kupfu's details. Kupfu, the Wushu Pokémon. A serious Pokémon with a strong sense of justice. It diligently trains to strengthen its body and spirit. Type, fighting. Ability, inner focus. Known moves, Leer, rock smash, endure, focus energy, aerial ace, scary face, headbutt, brick break, detect, coaching. Mood, determined. Even kings must prove their mettle. Status, excellent, though it seems a bit sleepy. Friendship level, 10. It likes your Tinkatuff's hammer. Johan chuckled. Kupfu's skills weren't overly flashy. No swords dance or close combat yet. Its raw strength was impressive for its stage, but its personality was what stood out. Let's test something, Johan murmured, releasing a wave of his own aura toward Kupfu. Kupfu froze mid-step, visibly startled. That should do it, Johan thought. He approached slowly, holding out a cube of Pokémon food. Kupfu tilted its head, eyes darting between Johan and the food. Ku, for me? Yes, for you. Go on, Johan said, smiling. After a moment of hesitation, Kupfu accepted the treat and devoured it in one bite. Hic! Kupfu hiccuped, then let out a long yawn. Johan's eyes lit up. One treat was enough to fill it up. This was a trainer's dream. Satisfied, Johan turned to Mustard. Sensei, it seems this little one and I are a good match. Mustard grinned. Then don't wait. Catch it, little Johan. Without hesitation, Johan knelt and extended a luxury ball. Will you join me as my partner? Kupfu stared into Johan's eyes before nodding firmly. The luxury ball clicked shut without resistance. Inside, Kupfu curled up and promptly fell asleep. As Johan held the sealed luxury ball, Mustard let out a dramatic sigh of relief. Sensei, Johan asked. Mustard beamed. Just excited for you, little Johan. Let's head back for lunch. Honey's preparing a feast. Johan followed, puzzled by Mustard's enthusiasm. Something felt off. Before he could dwell on it further, a deep rumble shook the ground. Boom! A crimson light flared in the distance. Sensei, what is that? Mustard mused casually, as though the phenomenon was a minor inconvenience. Some Pokémon around here have been acting up lately. Probably nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about, Johan thought, incredulous. But before he could question further, Mustard turned and pointed. Bring Kupfu out, little Johan. Let's stretch its legs. Reluctantly, Johan released Kupfu from its ball. Zizi, still asleep, Kupfu remained standing, swaying slightly. But when a massive dreadnought emerged from the swamp, eyes glowing red with rage, Kupfu snapped to attention. Its posture shifted fluidly into a fighting stance, its eyes focused despite the sleepiness lingering in its aura. Sensei, are you sure? Mustard interrupted with a grin. Time to command, little Johan. Johan hesitated, but gave a simple order. Kupfu, brick break. The moment he spoke, Kupfu burst into motion, its movements a blur. The enraged dreadnought lunged with its massive jaws, but Kupfu sidestepped with effortless grace. It pivoted midair, its paw glowing with fiery red energy, and delivered a devastating blow to Dreadnaught's shell. Boom! Dreadnought collapsed with a pained roar, its tough armor cracking under Kupfu's strike. Johan gawked. You weren't like this a moment ago. Kupfu exhaled deeply, its aura settling. Zizi, it returned to its upright, sleeping posture as though nothing had happened. Mustard clapped Johan on the back. Impressive, isn't it? Looks like your Kupfu's got a knack for channeling aura in battle. Johan sighed, rubbing his temples. Sensei, you could have warned me about this. Mustard only laughed. Good luck raising that one, little Johan. The dreadnought wasn't completely defeated, but had been jolted back to its senses by the intense pain. It shot a wary glance at the still sleeping Kupfu before slinking toward the swamp, clearly intimidated. But then Kupfu moved again. It grabbed onto the dreadnaught's tail, preventing its retreat. Dreadnought froze, turned its head, and stared nervously at Kupfu. Omega, ZZZ. Kupfu held out its paw toward the dreadnought. Understanding the gesture, Dreadnought rummaged around its body, eventually producing a berry and handing it to Kupfu. Once it had the berry, Kupfu finally released the tail, and Dreadnought fled into the swamp like its life depended on it. Johan, this level of coordination, so practiced and seamless. What on earth is this? Watching the scene unfold, Johan broke into a cold sweat. Was that righteous expression from earlier all an act? A soft pop sounded as the bubble of snot on Kupfu's nose burst. It yawned lightly and slowly woke up. Kupfu stared at the berry in its hand, scratching its head in confusion. Then its gaze sharpened, and a profound, solemn expression appeared on its face as if the weight of a great destiny had just been placed upon its shoulders. Kupfu clasped its paws together and bowed toward the vast forest. Thank you, Mother Nature, for this gift. I am the chosen one, destined to fulfill my great calling. The surroundings grew quiet again, leaving only the sound of Kupfu munching on the berry. Johan's eye twitched. So eating that one energy cube earlier satisfied it, because it wasn't actually hungry. He tilted his head back at a 45-degree angle and let out a long sigh. Turning to look at Master Mustard, Johan found him cheerfully speaking into a phone with an overly joyful expression. Yes, it's already been taken in by Johan. Honey, let's prepare a couple more dishes for lunch to celebrate. The unrestrained glee radiating from Mustard made Johan's forehead vein twitch. If Mustard weren't a martial arts legend, Johan might have thrown hands. At that moment, Kupfu walked over and handed the berry it had been nibbling to Johan. "Cool." It smiled innocently at him. "Want some? It's really tasty." Johan's tense expression softened. At least Kupfu's aura and his own wave frequencies were compatible. That much was clear. He crouched down slightly, rubbing the little bear's head. To his surprise, its fur was incredibly soft and fluffy, almost as delightful to touch as Vulpix's coat. "I'm not hungry," he said, initially refusing the berry. But noticing the look in Kupfu's eyes, he relented, took the berry, and took a bite. "It's pretty good." "Cool." Satisfied, Kupfu finished the rest of the berry with a crunch before letting out another yawn, its eyes tearing up slightly from sleepiness. "Go ahead and rest for now," Johan said as he returned Kupfu to its luxury ball. Honestly, as long as Kupfu wasn't asleep, things still seemed manageable. "Looks like it really likes you, Johan," Mustard said with a knowing smile after ending his call. "Yeah," Johan replied, though his voice was laced with resignation. "Thanks for that, Master Mustard." Waving it off casually, Mustard continued walking back to the dojo. "But Johan, no kidding, this Kupfu is highly talented. A lot of people try to catch it before you, but none succeeded. Really, with how it dozed off at every turn. Oh wait, right? A sleeping Kupfu would be far harder to catch than an awake one. By the way, Johan, you can use aura, right?" Mustard suddenly asked. "A little," Johan admitted openly. To a martial artist like Mustard, aura wasn't a foreign concept at all. Many fighting-type Pokémon, such as his Urshifu or Minsheo, were capable of using moves like Aura Sphere. "That explains it," Mustard nodded knowingly. "This little guy's aura talent is exceptional too." Johan had already noticed that himself. "It's not just its aura talent. Did you catch on to anything else?" After a moment's thought, Johan hesitated before saying, "Single strike style and rapid strike style." Mustard's long eyebrows twitched with amusement. "I knew you'd pick up on that. It picked them up itself from visiting the Towers of Waters and Darkness," he added. "By itself. Normally, a Kupfu would evolve into Urshifu after visiting one of the two towers. But Johan quickly connected the dots. It went there while asleep? Bingo, Mustard chuckled. It doesn't even remember what happened while it was there. Training while sleeping? Johan suddenly noticed the luxury ball in his hand shaking slightly. Through the transparent window, he could see Kupfu doing push-ups inside. What? So diligent. But because it was half asleep, its heart remained pure, focused solely on martial arts, Mustard explained with a smile. Is that even a thing? Returning to the dojo, Mustard excused himself to check on Honey and left Johan to train with the other Pokémon. Throwing out Kupfu's luxury ball, Johan watched as it appeared, promptly dropping to the ground and doing push-ups in its sleep. Everyone, come out and meet your new teammate, Johan announced. Jengar, Vulpix, Tinkatuff, and Dragonair materialized in turn. Tinkatuff and Jengar were already familiar with Kupfu and respected its combat prowess. Vulpix and Dragonair, however, were curious. Dra, is it asleep or awake? Oh, can it even hear us? Coo. ZZZ. Kupfu suddenly stood up, nodded toward Vulpix, and went back to its push-ups. Ooh. Vulpix tilted its head in confusion, a question mark practically floating above it. Kaka. Let's just wake it up already. Jengar laughed mischievously, looking at Dragonair. Slightly hesitant, but ultimately agreeing, Dragonair's antennae sparked with golden energy, delivering a jolt to Kupfu. Coo! Coo! Kupfu's entire body jolted as its fur stood on end, the snot bubble finally bursting. Coo, that tickles. Ooh, nice one, Dragonair. Johan was mildly impressed. Great job, Dragonair. You're our official alarm clock now. As everyone introduced themselves, Kupfu extended its paw. Coo. Let's team up and conquer the world together. Jengar, being the group's self-appointed leader, shook its paw firmly. Kaka, welcome aboard. Observing this scene, Johan rubbed his temples and sighed. Why does this feel like a criminal gang is forming under my nose? The outlaw squad, now had a new member. Leader, Jengar, Master Infiltrator. Tinkatuff and Cubfu. One a cunning thief, the other a bold enforcer. Vulpix and Dragonair, specialists in underground and aerial operations. A group this versatile was destined to cause havoc. Johan let out a long sigh. Well, at least they're getting along. If it ever came down to it, he'd have to rely on his so-called path of righteousness to rein them in. After all, they say Pokémon eventually reflect their trainer's personality. Someday, they'll all become as upright as I am. Hello, Johan. Why the sudden call? On the other end of the phone came Professor Oak's familiar, cheerful voice. Professor Oak, Johan began, taking a deep breath before continuing, there's a problem with your Pokédex. Pokédex? Oh, a problem? What kind of problem? Tell me about it. Professor Oak's voice held a hint of surprise. It wasn't unusual for older models to have bugs, but this was a new version. All right, Johan was the first user. Well, that explains it. It's like this. Johan briefly described the Pokédex's analysis of Cubfu, especially emphasizing the inconsistencies around the word justice. This time, not only had he been tricked by Master Mustard, but he felt like the Pokédex had also deceived him. Ah, I see now. Professor Oak mused, sounding thoughtful. Actually, I obtained the information on Cubfu from Old Mustard. Master Mustard had provided input for the Pokédex during his world travels, having crossed paths with Professor Oak along the way. So, the source of the problem was Mustard after all. At that moment, Johan heard a new voice on the line. Professor Oak, still working? You haven't eaten, have you? I brought some steamed crab. It's the perfect season for it. It was a woman's voice. Oh, Hanako, how thoughtful of you. And Professor, where's Green? Came another voice, youthful and slightly high-pitched, almost baby-like. Sorry to interrupt. Johan ended the call with a curt farewell and a sigh. Betrayed again. Back at the dojo, the small dining table was laden with a variety of dishes, showcasing Honey's impressive culinary skills. Johan couldn't find anything to criticize. Professor Johan, would you prefer to pay in cash or card? Honey approached with a tray, smiling sweetly. Johan, you should have expected this. The memories of being exploited in-game by Honey were resurfacing, bringing with them a pang of nostalgia. But Johan quickly remembered something crucial. This trip was funded by public expenses. Pulling out a bank card, he declared boldly, Honey, charge it to the card. Honey's eyes curved into delighted crescents as she pulled out a POS machine, skillfully processing the payment. POS machines on the Isle of Armor? Truly ahead of her time, Honey. Well then, I wish you all a pleasant meal. While Johan and Mustard enjoyed their lunch, Honey also prepared food for the Pokémon, accommodating their appetites with commendable effort. However, she had clearly underestimated how much Jengar and the others could eat, keeping her busy running back and forth. Meanwhile, Mustard's face began to flush as he reached a pleasantly tipsy state. Little Johan, hick, let me tell you something. You gotta use your aura properly, like this. He wobbled to his feet, hiccuped again, and assumed a forward-facing stance. His eyes sharpened, and he delivered a punch so swiftly that the air itself seemed to crackle with a dull boom. And like this, switching to a stance reminiscent of a one-legged crane, he unleashed a series of rapid punches and kicks at blinding speed. It was the essence of single-strike style and rapid-strike style. But Johan's expression turned odd. Perhaps because of Mustard's drunken state, his movements bore an uncanny resemblance to something. Lightning 5 whips. Johan murmured to himself. What's that? Mustard froze mid-motion, having caught Johan's muttered words. Lightning 5 whips? Old Mustard's Lightning 5 whips? That's a great name. Mustard swayed over to a cabinet, retrieving 2 scrolls. One bore a water droplet symbol, while the other featured a half-closed eye. The secret techniques of single strike and rapid strike styles? This is too valuable. Without hesitation, Johan expertly pried open Jengar's mouth and stuffed the scrolls inside for safekeeping. Mustard waved a hand dismissively. Valuable? Not at all. They're just my personal interpretations of the principles of hardness and softness. Johan had heard of these before, the two primary schools of martial arts philosophy in the Pokémon world. For example, Bruno adhered to the philosophy of hardness, while trainers like Brawley and Chuck leaned towards softness. These aren't as profound as the teachings in the Towers of Two Fists, but they should still be useful to you. Useful? That was an understatement. They'd be invaluable for both Tinkatuff and Kubfu. Of course, how much you can learn depends on you, Mustard added. Back in the day, little Leon got these same scrolls, but he only picked bits and pieces to incorporate into his own style. Johan nodded. Every trainer had their own philosophy and approach when it came to raising Pokémon. The insights he'd gained from texts like Fear Tactics, Dragon Mastery, and Earth's Essence were things he used for inspiration, not imitation. As the saying goes, those who learn from me survive. Those who mimic me perish. Consider these a token of thanks for taking in that little one. Huh, a token of thanks? Was Mustard that eager to get rid of Kubfu? Drunk words are sober thoughts, after all. Nevertheless, Johan stood up and bowed deeply in gratitude. Thank you, Master Mustard. Snore. Mustard had already flopped onto the floor, snoozing peacefully. In the afternoon, Johan sat under a beach umbrella, flipping through the scrolls while contemplating training strategies for Tinkatuff and Kubfu. Kubfu's silky fur and bushy brows screamed martial arts prodigy. Johan wouldn't even be surprised if it suddenly pulled off a night guy. Wait, that's the wrong reference. Under Jengar's influence, his thoughts wandered a bit too far. In any case, whether it evolved into single-strike Urshifu or rapid-strike Urshifu, Kubfu was fundamentally a physical attacker. With a base speed stat of 72 and 97 after evolution, it was even faster than Dragonair and Dragonite. Its evolution brought about the amazing ability Unseen Fist, which allowed contact moves to bypass protective barriers, except Dynamax shields. Combine that with its signature moves, Wicked Blow for single strike style or Surging Strikes for rapid strike style, both of which had near-guaranteed critical hits. Pair it with items like Choice Band or Scarf, and its offensive potential was through the roof. Maybe it could even go dual strike, Johan mused. While its special attack stat was only 63, it wasn't unheard of. Jengar's attack stat was similarly low at 65, yet it managed to excel as a mixed attacker. I'll let Kubfu decide its evolution path. Bam! A sudden noise snapped Johan out of his thoughts. Looking up, he saw Tinkatuff swinging its hammer furiously at a rock. In the sky above, a Corviknight twitched nervously, instinctively dodging. But Tinkatuff's aim was true. A rock hurled with perfect precision hit the Corviknight square on the head. The metal bird plummeted to the ground, dazed. Chew! Tinkatuff raced forward with glee, pinning the fallen Corviknight with its hammer. Moments later, Jengar, Vulpix, Dragonair, and Kubfu surrounded the scene. Cool. Kubfu's eyes sparkled as it observed. So that's how it's done. My old methods of planting trees to claim territory were far too primitive. This is the power of teamwork. Kubfu approached the unconscious Corviknight. It clasped its paws together in a gesture of respect and solemnly bowed. Ku, for the greater good, kindly sacrifice yourself. Jengar patted Kubfu on the shoulder. Ka. No need to sacrifice anyone. We're pacifists here. If Johan got mad, none of them would survive his wrath. Kubfu's expression cleared with understanding. Ku, for the greater good, I'll pluck its feathers instead. Rolling up its sleeves, Kubfu joined the others in their raid. Watching its new teammates at work, Kubfu smiled. It already felt like a perfect fit in this squad. Night fell. To minimize disturbance to others, Honey had arranged for Johan to stay in a small standalone house within Master Mustard's dojo. Of course, this came at a steep price, which Johan dutifully paid. Bang, bang, clang, clang. The sound of hammering iron filled the air without pause. Tinkatuff squatted on the ground, its face glowing with enthusiasm. In front of it lay its prized and weighty hammer, surrounded by a chaotic pile of Corviknight feathers. These were trophies from its recent hunts. To be fair, Tinkatuff couldn't take all the blame. Corviknights on the Isle of Armor had never encountered Pokémon like Tinkatuff or Tinkaton before. Whenever they spotted Tinkatuff's hammer, a metal of extraordinary purity, they couldn't help but be drawn to it. What they didn't know was that the real predator often masquerades as prey. When the Corviknights set their sights on Tinkatuff's hammer, Tinkatuff set its sights on their feathers. This was simply the natural law of the Pokemon world, a survival of the fittest scenario Johan couldn't interfere with. At most, he had ordered Tinkatuff to exercise some restraint. Take half the feathers, no more. Let them fly away, so we might encounter them again someday. I'm just so kind-hearted, Johan thought to himself, sighing. Even so, in just one day, Tinkatuff's gains exceeded all expectations. Here it was, hammering away even after dinner, tirelessly swinging for nearly 4 or 5 hours straight. A mountain of feathers still awaited incorporation into its hammer. Choo-choo. But Tinkatuff showed no signs of fatigue, repeating its mechanical movements with excitement. This hammer isn't heavy enough. Not nearly heavy enough. Johan, lying in bed, was slowly being lulled to sleep by the rhythmic clanging. Finally, he couldn't hold it in any longer. Tinkatuff, call it a day. You can finish tomorrow. It's bedtime, Johan said. Although they were in a standalone house, the noise could still disturb others' sleep. Chew. Tinkatuff paused, wiping the sweat from its brow. After blinking a few times, it reluctantly set the hammer down. Johan let out a sigh of relief. The world was finally quiet again. Jengar, lights out, Johan instructed. Kaka. Jengar, holding the scroll of the Wicked Fist, popped its head out of the ceiling and gleefully scurried off to turn off the lights. You really are the master of turning things dark, Johan muttered as he cuddled Vulpix. Soon, he drifted into slumber. It had been an exhausting day. Flying to the Isle of Armor, traveling from Winden to meet Master Mustard, battling him, and finally capturing Kubfu. Before long, he was sound asleep. Jengar, no causing trouble at night. Johan mumbled in his sleep. Jengar floated down from the ceiling, scratching its head. Kaka. Seeing that Johan was fast asleep, Jengar smirked mischievously. It clapped its hands. Kaka. Who's up for a late-night adventure? Dragonair, ever the overachiever, tumbled off the bed. Ooh. Vulpix kicked at the blanket, but remained firmly trapped in Johan's embrace, reluctantly giving up. Chew. Tinkatuff stealthily picked up its hammer and climbed down from its bed. Of course, it had to join. Why? Because it and Jengar were the ultimate team. Without Tinkatuff, Jengar's efficiency would drop by at least half. Kaka. Is that it? Ku. Omega, ZZZ. Kubfu, sound asleep with a bubble on its nose, suddenly stood up, flexing its fists. Jengar waved a hand in front of Kubfu's face. Kaka. Can you even see me? ZZZ. Kubfu struck a formidable pose, exuding intense energy. Kaka. Jengar gave a big thumbs up. It didn't fully understand Kubfu's odd behavior, but it had seen how terrifying Kubfu could be in its sleep. Kaka. Move out. Morning sunlight filtered through the windows. The Isle of Armor's climate was surprisingly similar to Hoen's. When Johan woke up without Jengar licking him awake, he knew something must have happened last night. Ooh. Vulpix licked Johan's face, fully rousing him from slumber. After getting up and washing up, Johan headed outside. Jengar was munching on a mushroom that looked like a shrunken pokeball in one hand, still clutching the scroll of the Wicked Fist in the other. As expected, Jengar had been busy overnight. Dragonair was sunbathing, still full of energy despite recent improvements to its routine. Tinkatuff was, unsurprisingly, the most hyper. It seemed dead set on single-handedly plucking every Corviknight on the Isle of Armor. The only one that seemed relatively calm was Kubfu. Yet even while snoring, it was doing push-ups with a massive boulder on its back, no less. Training while awake, training while asleep. This little guy definitely lives up to its serious brows and piercing gaze, Johan muttered. Wait a second. An indefatigable Jengar, a sleep-training Kubfu. Wasn't this the perfect duo? A familiar sense of exhaustion washed over Johan as he shook his head. Vulpix, at least you're the most well-behaved, he said, cuddling the fluffy Pokémon tightly. After several deep breaths, he felt much better. Oh, forward slash forward slash forward slash forward slash. Breakfast is ready. At the sound of Johan's call, Kupfu's nose bubble popped. It tossed aside the boulder and eagerly scampered over with the others. Watching Kupfu's ravenous appetite, Johan wiped sweat from his brow. Calm down, he muttered. Kupfu's increased training justified its increased appetite. Or so he thought. But soon enough, Johan witnessed Kupfu's truly voracious capacity, rivaled only by Jengar. It's fine. Johan reassured himself, though his tone betrayed a hint of unease. The profits from Meowth and Piku should start rolling in soon. Feeding one Kupfu was manageable, probably. If worst came to worst, he could always open his Pokemon Psychology clinic to rake in cash from wealthy clients. PQ. Mid-meal, tears streamed down Kupfu's face. What's wrong? Johan gently patted its head, concerned. The organization is too good to me. Not only did they provide such delicious food, but last night's spoils of nature surpassed what it usually gathered in an entire month. Surely, even the heavens approved of its decision to join. With teary eyes, Kupfu looked at Johan with unwavering resolve. I swear fealty, Chief. Johan, though he wasn't sure why, a strange heaviness settled in his chest. But from Kupfu's gaze and its aura, he could feel the little one's sincerity. After breakfast, Tinkatuff resumed its bird-hunting campaign, aided by Jengar and the others. Far away, a Corviknight eyeing Tinkatuff's hammer suddenly trembled as dark red particles gathered around it. Above, ominous black-red clouds began to swirl. The Corviknight's body swelled as crimson light enveloped it. Johan, reading on the beach, stood up abruptly, narrowing his eyes at the sight. This is the swirling red mist, the rapidly expanding figure. Gigantamax. Chew! Tinkatuff blinked, then broke into an ecstatic grin. Chew! What a big bird. A Gigantamax Corviknight. The concept of Gigantamax was introduced in the 8th generation of Pokémon and is unique to the Galar region. Gigantamax essentially unleashes a special energy field from within the Pokémon, distorting the surrounding space and making the Pokémon appear much larger than it truly is. Upon Gigantamaxing, a Pokémon's size grows exponentially, its HP increases, and all its moves transform into max moves. Some Pokémon, like Corviknight, also have Gigantamax forms, distinct from normal Dynamax, featuring unique appearances and exclusive moves. In essence, however, Gigantamax is just a more specialized form of Dynamax. Thanks to its highly marketable nature, Dynamaxing became a central feature of Galar's commercial Pokémon leagues, spurring the region's development into a hub of spectacular Pokémon battles. Under the joint promotion of Macrocosmos and the Galar League, this effort proved to be a huge success. And Corviknight is one such Pokémon with a Gigantamax form. Screech! The massive Gigantamax Corviknight hovered in the sky, its immense body gleaming with dark red highlights. Above its head, 3 swirling gray and red vortexes of energy orbited ominously, a telltale sign of its Gigantamax state. Whoosh! The colossal bird flapped its wings, generating terrifying gusts that swept across the land. Choo-choo! Tinkatuff showed no fear at the sight of the now enormous Corviknight. On the contrary, its excitement was palpable. Such a big bird. Just imagine how glorious its feathers must be. Ka-ka! Asterisk, it's so big, asterisk. Jengar and the others stared in awe at the towering Gigantamax Corviknight. For most of them, this was their first time witnessing a Gigantamax Pokémon. Kupfu, however, had seen something similar before and remained relatively composed. But while they marveled, the Gigantamax Corviknight wasn't idle. Screech! The massive bird let out another piercing cry, flapping its enormous wings as an oppressive energy rippled outward. Suddenly, with a forceful swing of its wings, a massive white tornado shot forth at incredible speed. Gigantamax Windstorm Vortex. This was the Gigantamax Corviknight's signature move. Max Windstorm Vortex inflicts damage while nullifying effects like Reflect, Light Screen, Spikes, and terrain-based conditions. Big, big, big tornado. Johan, however, remained unfazed. At its core, Gigantamax merely enlarges the Pokémon, amplifies its moves, and improves its accuracy and secondary effects. It doesn't fundamentally alter the Pokémon's inherent strength. This particular Corviknight, even in its Gigantamax state, was still just that, a Corviknight. Vulpix set up Aurora Veil. Johan ordered calmly. Amid the raging winds, flakes of snow began to fall, forming layers of shimmering auroral light. Gigantamax Windstorm Vortex might have been able to clear Reflect and Light Screen, but it couldn't dispel weather-based barriers like Aurora Veil. Meanwhile, Tinkatuff climbed onto Dragonair's back, gripping its hammer tightly. Dragonair's white wing-like fins expanded as it began to ascend toward the sky. Kaka, can I grow that big too? Jengar tilted its head in wonder. If I could grow that big, just imagine how much I could eat. Jengar, Shadow Ball. Johan's voice cut through Jengar's musings. Kaka. Snapping back to reality, Jengar grinned mischievously. Raising its hands high, it conjured a massive sphere of darkness in mere moments and hurled it at the colossal Corviknight. With such a massive target, missing was nearly impossible. For the first time, Johan realized that Dynamax battles might actually suit him. Mom won't have to worry about my moves missing anymore. Boom! The enormous Shadow Ball struck the Gigantamax Corviknight squarely, eliciting a pained screech. Simultaneously, Dragonair and Tinkatuff reached the sky. Tinkatuff leapt high off Dragonair's back. Dra! Dragonair unleashed a thunderous bolt of lightning from its horn, striking the Gigantamax Corviknight with pinpoint accuracy. Kubfu, coaching, Johan called out. Kubfu nodded solemnly, cupping its hands around its mouth as it shouted toward Tinkatuff. Ku! Tinkatuff felt a surge of power course through its body. But more importantly, Kubfu's shout conveyed strategic advice, combat tips honed through its own training. One strike, decisive and lethal? Chew! Tinkatuff's eyes gleamed as it gripped its hammer. Let's try it. Frost began to enshroud the hammer as it swung through the air, growing layer by layer until the hammer itself expanded dramatically. Just as the Gigantamax Corviknight began to recover from the Shadow Ball and Thunderbolt, it found its vision dominated by an enormous hammer, rapidly descending toward it. Scree, scree! The Gigantamax Corviknight's mind reeled. Wait a second. I'm the one who's Gigantamaxed. Why are your moves more overpowered than mine? Are they even legal? But it didn't have time to think. Boom! The massive ice-coated hammer struck its head with devastating force, like a freight train slamming into it. The colossal bird flipped backward, its eyes rolling into its head as its consciousness faded. As it plummeted to the ground, its body began to shrink. Thud! Tinkatuff landed gracefully, caught mid-air by Dragonair, before they both descended toward the fainted Corviknight. Tinkatuff, however, bit its lip nervously as it stared at the shrinking bird. Chew! Chew chew! Stop shrinking! Don't shrink anymore! Meanwhile, Jengar floated toward the falling Corviknight, grinning deviously. Its eyes glinted with a faint light as it activated Trick, temporarily gaining Tinkatuff's pickpocket ability. Kaka! A sly smirk spread across Jengar's face as shadowy duplicates emerged beside it. With multiple clones working in unison, Jengar began rummaging through the fainted Corviknight's feathers and metallic body. Johan, watching from below, stood slack-jawed. So that's how Jengar exploits Tinkatuff's pickpocket ability. Normally, pickpocket has only a 30% chance of stealing items. But with sheer numbers and repetition, Jengar effectively bypassed this limitation. Jengar, you never cease to amaze me, Johan muttered. Moments later, Jengar's eyes sparkled as it extracted a dark red orb from the Corviknight's body. Kaka, what's this? It inspected the glowing object curiously before stuffing it into its mouth. Before Johan could even question Jengar, his attention was drawn to Tinkatuff. The little hammer-wielding Pokémon had landed on the ground and closed its eyes, adopting an unusually serious expression. Johan's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Tinkatuff opened its eyes moments later, a look of realization dawning on its face. Relieved, Johan sighed. It seemed Tinkatuff had simply learned a new combat technique, likely inspired by Kupfa's coaching. Choo-choo. Tinkatuff waddled toward the fainted Corviknight, puffing its cheeks indignantly. The once massive bird was now far too small to be worth its time. Johan couldn't help but comment. You've already collected so many feathers. Does your hammer even have room for more? Tinkatuff blinked. That makes sense. Just as Johan began to relax, Jengar pointed at Tinkatuff with a wide-eyed expression. Before Johan could ask why, he noticed a bright white light enveloping Tinkatuff. It was evolving. Tinkatuff's body grew slightly, its single ponytail splitting into twin tails. But the real change was its hammer, which swelled to an enormous size, several times its previous dimensions. When the light faded, the newly evolved Tinkaton stood proudly, hammer in hand. Cha! It ran toward the Corviknight, swinging its now massive hammer like a child with a new toy. Johan buried his face in his hands. Evolution was just an excuse to upgrade its hammer. How much metal will it take to fill that thing? The steel-type tragedy on the Isle of Armor continues. Johan sighed to himself. This wasn't just about the size of the hammer. With Tinkaton's evolution, the hammer's weight limit and its capacity for integrating materials had significantly increased. Additionally, the hammer's quality, or more accurately, its density, had improved dramatically. Before, a fist-sized piece of metal could be compacted down to a fingernail-sized fragment. Now, to achieve the same effect, Tinkaton might need a basketball-sized chunk of metal. The demand for materials had skyrocketed exponentially. Clang, clang, clang. As Johan mourned for the local Corviknight population, Tinkaton's hammering sounds pulled his attention back. Squatting on the ground, the little Pokémon was working diligently, its focus unmatched. But the process had clearly changed. Not only were the hammering sounds louder, but the rate at which Tinkaton was integrating metals had become ridiculously fast. What once took its strenuous effort to embed a single Corviknight feather into its hammer was now accomplished in mere moments. Johan took a deep breath. The increase in efficiency also meant an increase in consumption. And is that Gigaton hammer? He squinted at the hammering movements. Gigaton hammer, a 160-power steel-type move that deals heavy damage to the target but cannot be used consecutively. Big hammer, 160 damage. Gigaton hammer was Tinkaton's signature move, boasting tremendous power, though its inability to be used back-to-back was a notable drawback. Still, this limitation could be circumvented through strategies like Encore, Instruct, or Sleep Talk, enabling repeated use of Gigaton hammer and unleashing devastating combos. For now, though, Gigaton hammer seemed to be Tinkaton's ideal tool for forging. As Tinkaton worked tirelessly, Johan glanced at the updated information in his Pokédex. Tinkaton, type, fairy/steel. Ability, pickpocket. Moves known, ice hammer, faint, astonish, fairy wind, baby doll eyes, metal claw, stealth rock, skill swap, swords dance, brick break, Gigaton hammer, brutal swing, fake out. Mood, excited, determined, bring me 10 tons. No, 100 tons of heavy metal. Condition, excellent. Its state is inexplicably superb. Friendship level, 100, Mom. I evolved again. With its evolution, Tinkaton had learned 3 new moves. Gigaton hammer, its signature steel-type move, brutal swing, a dark-type move that deals damage to all nearby opponents. Fake out, a high-priority normal-type move that flinches the target if used immediately after entering battle. Fake out, in particular, was a favorite among competitive players. Its ability to force the opponent to flinch and disrupt their strategy made it an excellent tool for setting up momentum. Johan's gaze lingered on Tinkaton's mood entry for a moment. Let's just ignore that. If I don't look at it, it doesn't exist. After offering the Corviknight population another silent moment of mourning, Johan turned his attention to Jengar. Jengar, what exactly did you pull off that Corviknight? Kaka. Jengar scratched its head, looking equally puzzled. So, it opened its mouth wide and reached into its stomach. But after much rummaging, Jengar still hadn't pulled anything out. Kaka. Weird. What's wrong? Johan asked. Kaka. It's gone. Johan frowned. Gone? What's gone? Jengar gestured excitedly, its hands waving and mimicking an explosion. You mean you grabbed something dark red and glowing off the Corviknight? Kaka. Kaka. Jengar nodded eagerly. Johan's expression turned thoughtful. Could have been Galar particles? Galar particles were unique to the Galar region, closely tied to Eternatus, the source of Dynamax energy. Items like the Wishing Star could absorb these particles, and the Dynamax band that enabled Pokémon to Dynamax was also made from Wishing Stars. The Gigantamax Corviknight earlier had likely undergone its transformation due to an abnormal accumulation of Galar particles. But Jengar somehow managed to snag this cluster of particles and, for some reason, put it in its stomach. Did the particles dissipate? Or did Jengar absorb them? No, that's impossible. Only Eternatus can absorb Galar particles. Probably just dispersed. Still, Johan asked, Jengar, do you feel anything unusual? Kaka. Jengar tilted its head before clutching its stomach and collapsing dramatically onto the sand, its face contorted in mock agony. Johan froze in alarm before catching a glint of mischief in Jengar's eyes. He sighed heavily. You little. Walking over, Johan placed a hand on Jengar's shoulder. Aura sense activate. Through his aura, he checked Jengar's condition. Flawless. Absolutely perfect. Johan exhaled sharply and waved dismissively. It's hopeless. Bury it. Kaka. Sigma. Lol. Vulpix and Dragonair immediately caught on, smiling mischievously as they advanced toward Jengar. Kubfu, however, was utterly convinced. Tears streaming down its face, it began digging a grave in the sand. Ku. The boss's career ends before it even begins. I'll carry on your will. Unable to hold it in any longer, Jengar shot up with a startled gulp, frantically assuring everyone it was fine and that it was all a joke. Johan smiled faintly before roaring, thunderous outrage. Meanwhile, in Galar's Spikemouth energy plant, deep within the facility, a massive orb rested atop a platform, surrounded by scientists clad in dark uniforms. The room buzzed with activity as data was collected and analyzed. Suddenly, warning lights flashed and an alarm blared. What's happening? The core is becoming active. Could it be the expansion of the storage chamber? Or the particles dispersed during the process? But Chairman Rose said the core was in a dormant state. Without its full power, there's no way it could. Inside the orb, a pair of piercing white eyes cracked open slightly. For the first time in eons, the gaze flickered with faint curiosity before shutting again. A deep, rumbling voice echoed faintly within the sphere. Back on the Isle of Armor, Gigantamax Corviknight's rampage had ended swiftly, and with no major disruptions, Tinkaton had resumed its bird hunting. Its newly upgraded hammer attracted even more Corviknight, and with its evolution, it now needed no assistance to bring them down. Standing to the side, Cubfoot diligently coached Tinkaton in mastering one-blow-style techniques. Lying back on a beach chair, Johan retrieved the shimmering rainbow feather, giving it a light infusion of aura to restore its radiant glow. Don't dim. Satisfied with the feather's brilliance, Johan grinned. Who's more pure-hearted than me? Kaka. Elsewhere, Jengar and Dragonair stumbled upon a slowpoke basking lazily on the sand. Yaden. The slowpoke slowly turned its head, its golden-tipped tail glinting in the sunlight, as if in a daze. Jengar and Dragonair tilted their heads in unison. What was with this slowpoke? It looked like any other slowpoke, but something about it felt odd. As they stared at each other, time seemed to stand still. 2 days later, a gentle breeze swept across the skies of the Isle of Armor as Johan sat in a flying taxi, holding a paper bag in his hands. His expression was slightly peculiar. Cupful leaned against the window, tears welling in its eyes as it bit its lip and waved goodbye to the island below. Coo! Farewell, my starter village. We will succeed in our endeavor someday. On the ground below, Master Mustard, Honey, and the dojo's apprentices couldn't contain their smiles of relief as they waved the group goodbye. They were finally leaving. The Isle of Armor could finally have some peace. The pokeball on Johan's belt opened on its own as Tinkaton emerged into the taxi's cabin. Cha! Seeing that it had no intention of going after the Corviknight below, Johan let out a small sigh of relief. Even so, Tinkaton looked a little wistful. Cha! I'll miss this place. But it had nearly plucked the entire Corviknight population of the island bare. Just last night, Johan had spotted a group of Corviknight sneakily preparing to migrate under the cover of darkness. Tinkaton had yelled at them to stay. According to one particularly traumatized Corviknight, it had said, "Ka, ka, ka," which roughly translated to, "You don't understand how terrifying that pink devil with the giant hammer is." It may have looked harmless, but the sheer joy it showed while plucking their feathers sent shivers down their spines. If only they could stay high enough in the air and avoid its hammer. But who could have guessed that it had a flying dragon for backup? Johan glanced over at Tinkaton and Dragonair. If it didn't leave now, the Corviknight population on the Isle of Armor might actually go extinct. He had even seen it with his own eyes. A group of nearly featherless Corviknight hopping cautiously on the ground in search of food, not daring to fly. The moment they took off, they'd be instantly targeted. To make up for it, Johan had handed out a substantial number of poke blocks as compensation. At the very least, they needed proper nutrition to regrow their feathers. I really am too kind, Johan thought with a sigh. The Alolan Vulpix curled up in Johan's lap stirred slightly, letting out a soft cry. Oh, it's nice not to feel sad during goodbye. It hated parting, but this one didn't feel so bad. Sad farewells. Johan twitched his lips slightly. He looked at Jengar, who sat across from him, wearing an innocent expression as it nibbled on a poisonous mushroom. Honestly, if it were only Tinkaton, it wouldn't have been so bad. At most, it was just bullying the island's Corviknight population. But Jengar was the true terror of the island. After swapping abilities with Tinkaton, Jengar had taken the sleepwalking Kubfu into the woods at night. Who knew what horrors they had unleashed? According to Jengar, it was simply, I'm a natural-born jungler. Kubfu, on the other hand, had described it as, the abundance of nature's gifts is overwhelming. In just a few days, they had gathered enough resources to match what Kubfu would normally collect in half a year. There was even a rumor that Honey, on a routine mushroom-picking trip, had walked for miles without finding a single one. The dojo's dinner that night consisted of plain bread rolls and pancakes. Water was scarce, and the students had to fight each other to decide who got the bigger share. Noticing Johan's gaze, Jengar quickly finished its mushroom and flashed a harmless smile. Kaka, I really like this place too. The Isle of Armor was fantastic. The Pokémon here were skilled and friendly, truly a paradise for talents. Johan chuckled darkly. In truth, Mustard and Honey had given him a parting gift, or a thank you gift. It was the paper bag of seeds Johan now held. At first, Johan had been confused. Seeds? For him, he wasn't a farmer. But Honey had explained. These seeds are quite old. Unfortunately, I couldn't get them to grow, but their origins are extraordinary. They were passed down from the ancient kings of Galar. When Honey was still the head of a trading company, she had acquired the seeds by chance, but had never been able to make them sprout. When Johan received the bag, his first thought was, ancient seeds from Galar? After all these years, they're still viable? That would be the real miracle. But then he opened the bag. Inside, the seeds were plump and lustrous, with a faint glow. Ancient seeds? Really? Luckily, the Pokédex provided some clarification. Radish seeds, when planted in icy terrain, they grow into ice radishes. When planted in ghostly, deathly soil, they grow into black radishes. You're welcome. The mention of ice radish and black radish immediately brought to mind one specific Pokémon. Calyrex. Calyrex, known as the king of bountiful harvests, was a legendary Pokémon said to have ruled Galar in ancient times. Known for its extraordinary intelligence, it was said to oversee all things past, present and future. Calyrex also had two steed Pokémon, Glastrier and Spectrier, which loved ice radishes and black radishes respectively. The problem? Johan shook the bag, which still held quite a few seeds. Even if you gave these to me, I can't grow them. The conditions for cultivating these radishes were far too specific. Legends about Calyrex, Glastrier, and Spectrier were virtually forgotten in Galar. He glanced down at the Vulpix in his lap, and then at Jengar across from him. Could it work? If Alolan Vulpix created a patch of snow, and Jengar conjured an eerie, ghostly graveyard, perhaps they could recreate the conditions needed to grow these radishes. It wasn't about luring Glastrier or Spectrier. Both were fiercely proud, powerful Pokémon not easily subdued, even by Calyrex itself without the reins of unity. Instead, Johan figured the radishes must hold immense nutritional value if they were so coveted. If he managed to grow them, they'd make excellent snacks for Vulpix and Jengar, perhaps in the form of carrot mochi. Worth a try. After arriving back in Littleroot Town following a long flight, Johan released his Pokémon from their balls to let them reacquaint themselves with home. For him, it wasn't just about strength. It was about helping each Pokémon feel at home in the family. Upstairs. Ku, is this our new lair? Kaka, stick with me, and I'll show you our kingdom tonight. The other Pokémon grinned knowingly as they watched Jengar wrap an arm around Kubfu. Ku, Kubfu's eyes shone with determination. This is what it means to be part of a team. I love it here. The Pokémon began showing Kubfu their favorite things. Oh, you can climb these shelves as much as you want. Cha, feel free to hammer these metals. Dra, the bathtub is for relaxing. Jengar adjusted its sunglasses. Kaka, if you meet wild Pokémon out there, just drop my name, Fear Incarnate. Kubfu blinked, nodded solemnly, and puffed out its chest. Cuckoo, I already feel the pride of being part of this crew. Kubfu adapted to its new environment much faster than Johan expected, which, to his relief, was a good sign. It meant Kubfu was highly compatible with him and his team. After lunch, Johan made a trip to the department store, then returned to the cafe with his Pokémon, heading straight to the backyard. Although honey seeds probably wouldn't grow, it would be wasteful not to at least try. He had sectioned off 2 square-meter plots in the garden's northeast and northwest corners, designated for planting ice radishes and black radishes respectively. With winter approaching, most of the garden's plants had withered, making it an excellent time for cleanup. Johan had gone to the department store specifically to buy winter hardy flower seeds for the rest of the garden. The backyard. Dressed in an old outfit and a headscarf, Johan instantly transformed into a rugged farmer. "How's it going, Tinkaton?" he asked, hands on his hips. The clanging of metal came to a halt. Cha-cha, carrying a massive hammer in one hand and an assortment of tools in the other. Tinkaton proudly strutted over, its pink cheeks flushed as if seeking praise. Johan chuckled, giving its twin-braided head a vigorous rub. Good job. Tools were essential for garden repairs. Sure, he could have bought them, but why bother when Tinkaton could forge far superior custom ones? Store-bought tools weren't tailored to Pokémon anyway. Cha! Tinkaton beamed with pride. Johan began assigning tasks. Kubfu, the weeds and dry grass in the garden are all yours. Ku. Kubfu accepted a small hoe with a solemn nod. Proper food reserves are the foundation of any operation, it thought. This is agriculture at its core. Johan's eye twitched. He was getting used to Kubfu's obsession with revolutionary plans, even if he still had no idea what, or who, it intended to overthrow. Tinkaton, you're in charge of pruning the trees in the garden. Johan handed it a pair of shears and added, just like plucking feathers from Corviknight, trim only half the branches. Too much, and the trees will look bare and ugly. Put the trimmed branches together with Kubfu's weeds for later disposal. Cha! Tinkaton glanced at the shears, then at its hammer, and hesitated. Can I just use my hammer? Absolutely not. Johan vetoed immediately. Using a hammer? The garden wouldn't have a single intact tree left. This is a test of your control over your strength, Johan said seriously. Can you follow my instructions without damaging the trees? Tinkaton nodded, enlightened. Cha, why didn't you say so earlier? It obediently took the shears. And Dragonair? Johan called, looking around. Dra! Dragonair's voice came from behind him. It had gotten stuck on a window ledge after flying down from the second floor. Johan sighed. Dragonair's streak of bad luck was par for the course. Rescuing Dragonair, he assigned its task. You're on watering duty. Just make sure you control the water flow, okay? Dragonair's ability to manipulate weather, combined with its water-type moves, made it perfect for the job, as long as it didn't turn watering into a flood. Dra! Finally, Johan turned to the two most critical Pokémon for his planting project, Alolan Vulpix and Gengar. Vulpix, I need you to build 2 raised flower beds out of ice. The ice must be sturdy enough not to melt easily. Whether it was ice radishes or black radishes, both thrived in crown tundra-like conditions. Temperature wouldn't be an issue. Ooh, Vulpix nodded, grabbing the blueprint, a loose sketch at best, and began constructing in the corner. That left Gengar. Johan turned to the chubby ghost with a sly smile. Kaka. Gengar gulped, instinctively stepping back. What are you planning with that mischievous grin? Johan motioned for it to relax. Gengar, let me ask you, if those radishes grow, who do you think will eat them? Kaka. Me and Vulpix, obviously. Would you like to try them? Kaka. Drool trickled from Gengar's mouth. Johan's smile widened. Then you understand that special seeds like these require fertile soil, right? Gengar nodded instinctively, but froze as Johan continued. And how do we make the soil more fertile? Gengar's mind blanked. Kaka. Crap. This feels like a setup. Thinking quickly, Gengar offered Kaka. Should I bury some bodies? Johan's face darkened. Grabbing Gengar by its spikes, he cut to the chase. Enough nonsense. You pilfered so much on the Isle of Armor. Hand over some of it, or else. Gengar yelped, Kakh. Oh, fine. Take it. Using its most menacing tone, it gave the most cowardly response. It reached into its stomach dimension and pulled out a heap of items, leaving Johan speechless. No wonder Master Mustard and Honey wanted us gone so badly. The pile included mushrooms, toxic mushrooms, Galarica twigs, multicolored berries, various seeds, molted Pokémon materials, and more. With such a haul, Johan no longer worried about soil fertility. Wrapping the items in cloth, he said, I'll turn these into compost. Gengar, help Vulpix with the flower beds. Dashing into the house, he murmured, There's enough here for cooking and making poke blocks later. Kaka. Gengar sighed in relief. At least I only handed over a small portion. When Johan returned, the garden repair and planting project officially began. The garden battle. Dragonair hovered above, exhaling a fine mist. Gentle rain fell, creating a miniature rainbow under the sunlight. Kubfu, holding its hoe, narrowed its eyes and focused. Ku, Omega, ZZZ, water, hoe, soil, rapid hoe technique. Dirt flew everywhere as Kubfu tilled the soil with blinding speed. Thwack! A wet clump of dirt splattered onto Johan's face. He froze. The Pokémon stifled their laughter, biting their lips. Then a sudden gush of water from above drenched him completely. Johan looked up at Dragonair, who smiled innocently. Dra, you're welcome. Thanks, Johan muttered through gritted teeth. Gengar couldn't hold back and burst out laughing. Kaka. Its laughter triggered the rest. Vulpix, Tinkaton, and even Dragonair joined in. Even the sleeping Kubfu twitched its head, as if laughing in its dreams. Funny, huh? Johan smirked darkly, grabbing a handful of mud. Take this, mud-style, earth splash barrage. Splat, splat, splat. Mud flew in every direction, covering every Pokémon. Their laughter stopped abruptly. Oh, it's war now. Gengar and Vulpix exchanged glances. Gengar, time to unleash my unbeatable ground techniques. Vulpix, I know dig, remember? Even Tinkaton gleefully patted its hammer. Cha-cha, didn't expect to use this again so soon. The backyard became a mudslinging battlefield. Dragonair, realizing what was happening, took a deep breath. Dra, waterfall barrage activate. Johan and the Pokémon froze in panic. Dragonair no. The aftermath. Though chaotic, the The planting plan was eventually completed. One flower bed shimmered with snow and ice, while the other emitted faint wisps of black mist, thanks to a small piece of reaper cloth Jengar reluctantly sacrificed. Still, Johan scratched his chin. Feels like something's still missing. Without proper isolation, the conditions might affect other garden plants. Drip drip. His phone buzzed. The caller ID read Forever 18. Lorelei. Lorelei? Curious, Johan answered. Johan, take a look at what I just sent you, Lorelei said. An ice sculpting contest? Friday. A gentle breeze drifted through the air as Johan lounged lazily on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Vulpix, he called softly. The Alolan Vulpix, perched atop a nearby cat tower, perked up at his voice. It stretched luxuriously on the platform, then gracefully hopped down from tier to tier. In no time, it was standing on the top of the couch behind him. Johan smiled and patted the open space beside him. Understanding immediately, the little fox leapt down from the couch's backrest and landed lightly beside him, curling up against his arm. Oh, it purred softly. Johan placed a hand on its soft, warm belly and gave it a gentle rub before pulling it into a deep embrace. Vulpix squirmed with delight, its tail wagging in contentment. Sometimes Johan thought it might be nice to live like this forever. Simple, carefree days spent with his Pokémon. Reading quietly with Jengar, cuddling with Vulpix, working out with Tinkaton, giving Dragonair a bath, and telling Kubfu stories before bed. Recently, Kubfu had developed a fascination with Johan's stories, particularly the romance of the Three Kingdoms and Water Margin. But dreams were beautiful, and reality was harsh. Johan might want peace, but his Pokémon didn't necessarily share that sentiment. So, to keep things under control, he made sure they were busy enough during the day to sleep soundly at night. Johan held up his phone for Vulpix to see. An ice sculpture competition. Interested? Oh, Vulpix blinked, suddenly alert. Its interest was immediately piqued as it stared at the intricate ice sculptures displayed on his screen. Seeing its enthusiasm, Johan smiled. He'd figured as much. This competition was right up Vulpix's alley. Building snowmen was one of its favorite activities. And to Vulpix, there wasn't much difference between sculpting and snowman building. It's part of the winter festival in Snowbell City, Kalos, Johan explained. With winter approaching, all sorts of events were being held across the Pokémon world. Skiing contests, ice sculpture competitions, figure skating championships, and more. Each event offered attractive prizes, drawing trainers from around the globe. This particular competition in Snowbell City was no exception. The grand prize was a high-quality icy rock sponsored by the Lysandra Lab, along with a generous supply of figgy berries. Even the runners-up and third-place winners would receive figgy berries, an ice stone, and never-melt ice, all rare and valuable items. Johan already owned a piece of never-melt ice, gifted by Lorelei. But just like the ice stone he'd once obtained, that never-melt ice had been mostly consumed by Vulpix. According to Lorelei, the never-melt ice in this competition was of much higher quality. Besides, one piece wasn't nearly enough for Vulpix, who had a penchant for hoarding. An ice stone, Johan murmured thoughtfully. He'd always wanted to give Vulpix an ice stone. He didn't know the quality of the one being offered here, but even the worst ice stone would fetch a high price. And even if they didn't win, participation alone came with a consolation prize of figgy berries. Oh, Vulpix perked up, nodding enthusiastically. It wanted to compete. Johan chuckled softly, stroking its head. He couldn't help but marvel at how far his little fox had come. From a shy and timid Pokémon he'd met to one ready to stand on a stage and showcase its talents. All right, if Vulpix wanted to join, and with such enticing prizes on the line, he had no reason to refuse. Besides, he was planning a trip to Kalos anyway, at Professor Sycamore's invitation. His only hesitation had been the competition's connection to Lysandra Labs. But on second thought, it didn't matter. If Lysandra had any interest in him, Diantha would have already mentioned it. Since he'd heard nothing, it was safe to assume Lysandra wasn't concerned about a small-time Pokémon psychologist. Let's get ready, Johan said. We're going to Kalos. Perhaps Snowbell City, with its perpetual snow and ice, would provide some insight into growing ice radishes. That afternoon, however, he received a call from Professor Sycamore's lab. Not from Elan this time, but the professor himself. "I apologize for not being available last time," Sycamore said, his voice tinged with weariness and genuine regret. "No problem, Professor. I was already planning to visit Kalos," Johan replied. "Oh, perfect. When will you arrive? I'll send someone to meet you at the airport." "No need for that, Professor. I like to take my time exploring Kalos." Kalos was inspired by France, with Lumiose City modeled after Paris, the City of Light. Johan wanted to soak in the romantic culture at his own pace. Still, he wasn't in a rush. As a teacher at Rustboro Pokémon Academy, he had administrative tasks to finish, even though classes were over. And, more importantly, he needed to file his expense report. Rustboro Pokémon Academy, Principal's office. Martin stood awkwardly, holding Johan's reimbursement form, and passed it to the principal, whose bruises from the last incident still hadn't faded. "This is Johan's expense report from his trip to Galar," Martin said hesitantly. He didn't know how to explain the document. The principal, cheerful as ever, waved off Martin's concern. "A reimbursement form? Why so nervous?" But as he scanned the document, his eyes widened. "How much?" "Well," Martin cleared his throat. "Principal, maybe Johan made a mistake somewhere." Skipping over the smaller items, Martin read aloud. 18 energy roots, 12 full restores, 20 max potions. He coughed awkwardly. "I'll confirm the details with Johan later." "No need." The principal shook his head solemnly and placed the form on his desk. Martin's heart sank. Oh no, even the principal is mad this time. Bam! The principal slammed his desk, then waved his hand decisively. "Approved." Martin was stunned. The principal sighed wistfully. Johan beat Master Mustard. "Wow, Master Mustard. That Master Mustard." Martin's jaw dropped. "Yes," the principal nodded. When he first heard the news from Master Mustard himself, he'd been just as shocked as Martin was now. Mustard might be old, but he was an undefeated champion for 18 consecutive years. That level of victory requires unimaginable effort, the principal continued. Johan's lengthy list of healing items only proved how much he'd endured. Martin exhaled slowly. Something feels off about this, but if the principal says so, I'll let it go. Still, one question lingered in his mind. What did Johan need 100 kilograms of coffee beans for? On the plane, Johan sneezed unexpectedly. He glanced at his phone, which displayed a notification for his approved reimbursement. Smiling, he murmured, "The Academy really does take care of its own." Jengar, meanwhile, was cackling uncontrollably. Caca. It clutched its phone, tears streaming down its face, as it watched the latest episode of Meowth and Piku. Thanks to Matt Ori and Team Rocket's efforts, the show had finally aired. With the combined influence of Team Rocket and Devon Corporation, it premiered across all major networks and streaming platforms. Feedback was overwhelmingly positive. The series boasted a 9.5 approval rating, rivaling the popularity of The Adventures of Poplio. And that was after just 3 episodes. Matt Ori had also gained Johan's approval to shoot scenes on location across different regions, aiming to make the series even more spectacular. Johan, however, was more concerned about his share of the profits. Outside the plane window, the weather was clear. The outline of the Kalos region loomed in the distance. Kalos, shaped like a 5-pointed star, was divided into several distinct areas. The plane was set to land in the heart of it all, Lumiose City. Known for the Prism Tower and Lumiose Museum, Lumiose City was the largest and most populous city in the Pokémon world. Its economy thrived on tourism, supported by cafes, shops, and restaurants scattered throughout the city. One of Johan's goals was to scout potential new hires for his cafe, whether human or Pokémon. "Dear passengers, we are now approaching Lumiose City." Caca. Jengar stowed its phone and fastened its seatbelt. Johan glanced at the ghost type, feeling an ominous premonition. Is Jengar's mega evolution about to get out of hand? Kalos, Lumiose City. From a distance, the iconic Prism Tower stood tall, piercing the sky. Bathed in sunlight, the tower's surface refracted a soft, radiant glow, showcasing a unique architectural beauty. Inside the Prism Tower lay Lumiose Gym, making the structure not just a landmark of Lumiose City, but also a hub for aspiring trainers. In Johan's memory, the Lumiose Gym leader was Clement, an expert in electric-type Pokémon and a man fondly nicknamed the Zap Genius. He was known for creating bizarre gadgets, which often exploded, giving their users an unintentional perm. Clement had a younger sister, Bonnie, an adorably bubbly girl who often accompanied him. But considering that Ash was still just a 7-year-old kid at this time, Clement was likely still in school himself. Fortunately, Johan wasn't here to challenge gyms, so the identity of the current leader wasn't of much consequence to him. Still, he couldn't help but chuckle at a curious trend. Every region seemed to have an electric gym leader who excelled in engineering and mechanics. From Hohen's Watson, who built the underground New Malville, to Sinnoh's Faulkner, who transformed Sunny Shore City into an energy-efficient marvel, these innovators shaped their regions. Even Kalos's Clement showed promise, despite being young. Only Kanto's Lieutenant Surge stood out, a rugged military man with little interest in invention. Kaka. Jengar held up a tourist brochure provided during the flight, comparing the map to their current location. Lumiose City was laid out in a radial pattern, with Prism Tower at its center, roads fanning outward like spokes on a wheel. According to the brochure, Professor Sycamore's lab was situated on South Boulevard, on the city's southern outskirts. Nearby were 3 popular cafes: Café Soleil, Café Lysander, and Café Introversion. Lumiose City was renowned for having the most cafes of any city in the Pokémon world, a testament to its thriving coffee culture. Good thing there's no river of sewage running through the city, Johan muttered, glancing at the map on his Pokédex. Imagine if there were some kind of boat parade. People might end up seasick rather than charmed. Thankfully, while Lumiose City drew inspiration from Paris, it avoided mimicking its Messier aspects. The streets were clean, with no trace of litter or unsightly piles. And since the ice sculpture contest wasn't being held in Lumiose City itself, they could enjoy their time here without feeling rushed. Jengar waved down a man in a blue uniform leading several Skiddo. Kaka. The man approached with a friendly smile. Hello, sir. Do you need a ride on a Skiddo? Skiddo were docile grass-type Pokémon with remarkable endurance. They could sense a rider's emotions through their horns, making them ideal for leisurely sightseeing. Yes, please, Johan said, smiling. Just one. Johan glanced at Jengar, whose eyes sparkled with excitement. Better make that 2, he said with a chuckle. Johan mounted one Skiddo with Vulpix in his arms, while Jengar climbed onto the other. The cobblestone streets of Lumiose City stretched out before them, flanked by charming, sun-dappled buildings. Sycamore trees lined the avenues, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. With every step, the tranquil beauty of the city enveloped them, from its laid-back architecture to the warm glow of the afternoon sun. Clip-clop. The rhythmic sound of Skiddo hooves filled the air. Vulpix sat nestled in Johan's lap, its curious eyes darting from one sight to another. Not far away, a woman carrying a parasol strolled leisurely, leading her Pokémon, a furfrou styled in an elegant matron trim. Look over there, Johan said, pointing in the opposite direction. A gentleman in a crisp white suit and round hat walked alongside a furfrou, sporting the debonair dandy trim. Ooh! Vulpix's eyes sparkled with wonder. If you'd like, we can get you styled like a queen, Johan teased. Ooh. The little fox's eyes gleamed at the thought of being a queen, but quickly shook its head, blushing furiously. It couldn't handle being that fashionable. Johan burst out laughing, ruffling its head affectionately. Don't worry, I'd never make you look ridiculous. How about a cute little princess dress instead? Vulpix snuggled closer, relieved. Wait, where's Jengar? Johan suddenly realized. The answer came in the form of rapid hoofbeats. Clip-clop, clop-clop. Jengar rode his Skiddo at full gallop, a look of sheer terror on both their faces. Skiddo's horns allowed it to sense emotions, and Jengar's chaotic thoughts had overwhelmed the poor creature. Visions of Johan becoming a ghost, Jengar conquering Lumiose underworld, world domination, and ghostly pirate adventures had flooded Skiddo's mind. Eyes wide with panic, it raced down the street, carrying Jengar further and further away. Ka-ka! The ghost cackled as the two vanished into the distance. Johan and Vulpix. They exchanged a glance. Well, Johan said finally. That's going to be a problem. Oh, with Jengar? Nah, I'm worried about the Skiddo. After much apologizing, Johan managed to calm the traumatized Skiddo with some energy cubes. Its trembling eventually stopped, and it returned to the nearby Skiddo station. Sorry about that, Johan said sheepishly to its handler. Then he shot Jengar a glare. The ghost Pokémon scratched its head, mumbling excuses about the Skiddo's lack of mental fortitude. Grabbing Jengar by the horns, Johan dragged him toward Sycamore's lab. Located on South Boulevard, the lab was an elegant building with white stone pillars and an inviting, open design. As they approached, the automatic doors slid open. Mr. Johan? A boy in a white lab coat greeted them with a bright smile. Alan? Johan asked. Yes. Welcome, Alan said, bowing deeply. Professor Sycamore asked me to wait for you. Thanks, Johan replied with a grin. Inside, Sycamore's lab was smaller than Oak's, but no less impressive. The glass walls of a long hallway gave a clear view of a simulated forest habitat, home to Pokémon like Floette, Diggersby, and Heliolisk. Among them were numerous starter Pokémon from Kanto and Hoenn, brought here to support Sycamore's research on Mega Evolution. Finally, they reached Sycamore's main lab. The professor was examining data on a Garchomp when he turned and greeted them warmly. Johan, it's been a while. It has, Professor, Johan replied with a smile. While Johan and Sycamore caught up, Jengar wandered over to the Garchomp. Ka-ka! Garchomp, confused, the dragon retreated a step, unsure why the ghost was grinning so mischievously. In the lab, Sycamore handed Johan a box. Inside were a Megastone and a Keystone. This is a Megastone for Jengar, Sycamore explained. It's paired with this Keystone. Please take them. It's my gift to you. Johan was stunned. A Megastone for Jengar? But it didn't look like the one he already had. And the Keystone was unmistakably genuine. Ka-ka. Jengar peeked through the wall, its eyes widening. I just heard Keystone. Professor Sycamore, this is a bit much, don't you think? It's too valuable, Johan said hastily. Mega Evolution, still in its early stages, was understood and utilized by only a handful of trainers. Even if it became widely known, both Megastones and Keystones would remain prohibitively expensive. Sycamore chuckled and explained, It's not a gift per SC. He continued, I hope you can use this Keystone in your Jengar's Mega Evolution to help me gather some data. For years, Professor Sycamore had dedicated himself to the study of Mega Evolution. However, due to limited data and resources, much about the phenomenon remained a mystery. He still lacked a comprehensive understanding of Megastones, Keystones, and the bond between Pokémon and their trainers that facilitated Mega Evolution. Even basic data on the types of Megastones and their compatibility with specific Pokémon was incomplete. Johan stared at the shimmering crystal in the box, lost in thought. He wasn't one to accept such a significant favor lightly. Megastones were incredibly costly, and even Keystones, though more general in their usage, were no trivial matter. Finally, after a brief silence, he reached into the box and picked up the Keystone, saying, If that's the case, I'll accept just the Keystone for now. Sycamore blinked in surprise. Johan, the Keystone needs to be used with a Megastone to... Johan smiled and cut him off. Don't worry, Professor. I already have a Megastone. He turned to Jengar, who grinned mischievously and extended its tongue. Nestled on the tip was a glittering stone it had been toying with. Blah, blah, blah. Jengar teased as it flicked the Megastone with its tongue. Sycamore stared, dumbfounded. This is... If I'm not mistaken, Johan said, this is Jengar's Megastone. The one you analyzed might belong to a different Pokémon entirely. Sycamore scratched his head in embarrassment. Ah, I see. I must have made a mistake in my data analysis. Still, he couldn't help but marvel. To think you already had a Mega Stone for Jengar, Johan. That's remarkable. Johan glanced at Jengar, who was happily tossing the Mega Stone into the air. It was a lucky find, he admitted. After all, the Mega Stone had been discovered near Jengar's ancient resting place. A fortunate coincidence. Sycamore felt a twinge of guilt. He had invited Johan all the way to Lumio City, only to misidentify a Mega Stone. Now, he couldn't even follow through on his promise of a Mega Stone. After a moment's thought, Sycamore said, "How about this? You help me collect data on Mega Evolution for now, and in the future, if you need another Mega Stone, I'll make sure to get you one." "Professor, there's no need for that. The Keystone alone is already," Johan began. But Sycamore interrupted with a grin. "Actually, I have another favor to ask." Johan paused, raising an eyebrow. "You're full of requests today, huh? Well, let's hear it." He decided to accept the arrangement. After all, he didn't have other Pokémon ready for Mega Evolution at the moment. Besides, he reasoned, the Keystone was already a priceless gift. Sycamore nodded approvingly. "Excellent. Then we're settled." At last, Johan slipped the Keystone into his pocket. With this, Jengar's Megastone and Keystone were finally complete. Keystone, a stone imbued with the power of bonds. It is the key to unlocking the Megastone, enabling a Pokémon to Mega Evolve. As Sycamore prepared to discuss Mega Evolution in greater detail, Johan suddenly remembered something. "Professor, actually, I have a favor to ask as well." Sycamore, intrigued, turned to him. "It's about a cafe I run back in Hoenn." Johan explained how his cafe was currently closed due to a staff shortage. Although the Rocket Trio was expected to return after their film project, he needed temporary employees to keep the business running smoothly. Being in Lumio City, a place with a thriving coffee culture, Johan hoped to find suitable candidates. "I didn't know you were a fellow coffee lover," Sycamore said with a laugh. "I can definitely help. I know just where to look for the right employees." He paused. "But if some of the staff are Pokémon," Johan's eyes lit up. "That would be perfect. It might even make communication easier." Sycamore chuckled and promised to help find employees for the cafe. With that matter resolved, Sycamore's expression turned eager. "Well then, Johan, shall we give Mega Evolution a try?" The professor's enthusiasm was infectious. Johan hesitated for a moment, but found himself nodding. As he pondered the logistics, Johan felt a sudden chill. Turning, he found Jengar staring at him with sparkling eyes, the Mega Stone glowing faintly in its mouth. At the same time, the newly acquired Keystone in Johan's pocket began to emit a soft vibration. Johan frowned. "Wait a second. Are we about to initiate Mega Evolution already?" The synchronization between him and Jengar was undeniable. A faint energy thread seemed to link them, shimmering with the power of their bond. The bond was so strong it left Johan momentarily speechless. "Isn't this a bit sudden?" Johan asked nervously. "No better time than now," Sycamore said. "And I'll be your opponent." Sycamore's partner Pokémon, a Garchomp, stood at his side. Although it wasn't as formidable as Cynthia's, it was still a capable battler. "Let's do it," Sycamore declared confidently. Despite his reservations, Johan knew this was a unique opportunity. "All right," he sighed. In the battle arena at the back of the lab, Johan and Sycamore stood at opposite ends of the field. In the middle were their partners, Jengar and Garchomp. Spectators included Sycamore's assistants Alan and Sophie, who were recording data, as well as a third guest, Gherkin, the gym leader of Shaller City and a Mega Evolution mentor. Gherkin, arms crossed, observed Johan intently. That energy, is it aura?" While Gherkin couldn't use aura himself, his partner Lucario was an expert in its manipulation, allowing him to sense traces of it in Johan. "Battle start." Alan raised his hand. Sophie activated her instruments, recording Jengar's first Mega Evolution data ready. At the center of the arena, Johan and Jengar locked eyes. The sounds of the outside world faded away, leaving only the synchronized thrum of their heartbeats. "Bottom, bottom, bottom. Are you ready, Jengar?" Johan asked softly. "Ka-ka." Jengar clenched its fists, bearing a feral grin. A radiant energy surged between them, their bond manifesting in the air like a shimmering thread. Johan raised his hand, the keystone glowing in response. With a commanding voice, he shouted, "Jengar, Mega Evolve!" Kaka! Jengar let out a bone-chilling roar. A brilliant white light erupted from the keystone in Johan's hand. Simultaneously, the megastone on Jengar's tongue began to emit a dazzling spectrum of colors, cascading like waves to envelop and transform its form. The battle arena, and even the room itself, seemed to tremble under the intensity of the energy. The radiant light filled the space, leaving the onlookers awestruck. Within the blinding glow, Jengar's body underwent a dramatic transformation. Its legs sank into the ground, seemingly merging with the shadows beneath it. The spikes on its back and ears elongated, becoming sharper and more menacing. Its arms rested on the ground, poised and powerful. At the center of its forehead, a golden, eye-like emblem, or perhaps a symbol resembling a coin, slowly opened. A dark crimson aura rose from below, painting its lower half in eerie hues. Moments later, the pulsating energy of Mega Evolution coalesced into the iconic Mega Evolution symbol in front of Jengar before dispersing into a burst of brilliance. Mega Jengar had arrived. Kaka! An overwhelming presence filled the room, emanating waves of raw, ghostly energy. Sycamore's face turned pale as he struggled to process the scene. Though he had witnessed Mega Evolution before, his friend Gherkin had shown him the transformation of a Lucario. It had never been like this. Lucario's Mega Evolution was calm and controlled, almost elegant in its intensity. But this, the sheer malevolence of Jengar's aura and the oppressive atmosphere it generated sent chills down his spine. The arena seemed to quake under the weight of this transformation, leaving Sycamore unsure whether this was the result of Jengar's extraordinary bond with Johan or something even more profound. Across the room, Alan and Sophie stood frozen, mouths agape. Yet none were more shaken than Gherkin, the seasoned Mega Evolution mentor himself. As the only trainer besides Johan with experience in Mega Evolution, Gherkin was well aware of the bond required for such a transformation. But the raw magnitude of what he had just witnessed left him stunned. This bond, it's beyond extraordinary, Gherkin murmured. Given time, they might not even need the Mega Stone for this. Battle start. Alan finally snapped out of his daze, his dry lips fumbling to announce the match. He glanced at Johan and Mega Jengar, his eyes brimming with admiration and a hint of envy. This is Mega Evolution? When will I have my own Mega Evolution and become the strongest Mega Evolution trainer? Garchomp, Sycamore called out to his partner. The dragon and ground type Pokémon froze. It wasn't just the dazzling spectacle that left Garchomp shaken. It had felt the full force of Mega Jengar's oppressive presence. This wasn't a friendly sparring match. This was pure intimidation. Dragon Rush, Sycamore commanded, trying to rally his Pokémon. Gairar, Johan and Jengar, however, seemed to be operating on an entirely different wavelength. Their connection had deepened during the Mega Evolution process, allowing them to communicate without words. They could feel each other's thoughts and intentions as though they were one. Johan was unaware that during this transformation, Jengar was burning through something deep within its core, a power both unfamiliar and thrilling. Kaka! Jengar cackled maniacally, reveling in the incredible strength coursing through its form. Johan spoke softly, his voice steady. Jengar, use Shadow Ball. Despite its boundless excitement, Jengar followed Johan's command without hesitation. It let out a low laugh, its hands lifting slightly as a massive, jet-black sphere began to form. Though it was just a Shadow Ball, the energy it contained far surpassed any attack Jengar had unleashed before. With a swift motion, Jengar launched the Shadow Ball. Boom! The entire arena shook as the attack made contact. Glass shattered, the floor cracked, and a shockwave rippled outward, forcing Alan and the others to stumble. Dust and debris filled the air as the room, descended into chaos. Gherkin, recovering from the blast, muttered hoarsely, This is the power of their bond. He had always known that the strength of Mega Evolution was directly proportional to the bond between trainer and Pokémon. But this was unprecedented. When the dust settled, Garchomp stood trembling in the center of the battlefield. The Shadow Ball had missed, but the sheer force of its passage had left cracks in the arena floor. A bead of sweat rolled down Garchomp's face as it realized, I can't survive another one of those. Johan exhaled deeply. That's enough, Jengar. The rainbow energy surrounding Mega Jengar dissipated, returning it to its original form. Ka-ka. Jengar slumped forward, hands on its knees, panting heavily. While its boastful exterior remained, it was clear that the transformation had taken a toll. Reaching into its dimensional pocket, Jengar pulled out a revive root and several poisonous mushrooms, stuffing them into its mouth with a dramatic flourish. Johan himself felt the strain as well. Though he had been training diligently, focusing on improving his aura and physical stamina, the effort required for Mega Evolution left him drained. It's exhausting, Johan admitted to himself. He glanced at Jengar, who was busy munching on its snacks, and chuckled. How are you holding up? Ka-ka. Jengar waved a dismissive hand, feigning strength. In the corner, Garchomp's claws trembled as it thanked the stars the battle was over. It was alive, but barely. The battle had ended, but the aftermath lingered. Johan noticed that the spectacle had drawn the attention of his other Pokémon. Tinkaton, Dragonair, and Kubfu had all emerged from their Pokeballs, drawn by the immense energy of Mega Evolution. Even Vulpix had come to watch, its eyes wide with admiration. Though proud of Jengar's display, Johan couldn't help but sigh. His Pokémon were clearly inspired, each determined to grow stronger. But that also meant, damn, Johan muttered, my expenses are about to skyrocket. Tinkaton and Kubfu immediately began training, flexing their muscles in a comical display of determination. Even Dragonair and Vulpix joined in, mimicking their movements. Jengar, ever the show-off, turned to Johan and puffed out its chest. Look at this. I'm inspiring a culture of effort. Johan rolled his eyes. Sure you are. As Johan considered the practicalities of Mega Evolution, he realized he needed a way to carry the Keystone. While Jengar could store its Megastone in its dimensional pocket, Johan needed a reliable and stylish way to keep the Keystone on him at all times. Many trainers use accessories like pendants, rings, or wristbands, but Johan wanted something unique. Maybe a monocle, he mused. With the battle concluded, Sycamore and his assistants busied themselves analyzing the data. Johan, meanwhile, wandered through the research facility with his Pokémon, enjoying the various exhibits and interacting with the other Pokémon on site. It wasn't long before Sycamore returned, his face alight with excitement. Johan, thank you. The data we collected today is invaluable. Johan smiled. Glad I could help. Oh, and about your cafe employees, Sycamore added, I've asked Sophie to help scout potential candidates. Some of them might even be Pokémon. Johan's eyes brightened. That's perfect. Thanks, Professor. At the Lumiose City Pokémon Center, Johan and his team were greeted by the ever-energetic Audino. Duda. Audino gave Johan a sweet smile as he stepped inside. Unlike other regions where joys are typically accompanied by Chansey or Blissey, Kalos Pokémon Centers are usually supported by Wigglytuff or Audino. This particular center featured Audino, which is a normal-type Pokémon with exceptional hearing capabilities. Audino can detect even the faintest sounds and vibrations, making it an invaluable asset for medical and rescue work. Its ability to sense heartbeats allows it to monitor physical and emotional states with unparalleled precision. Kaka, happy face. Jengar enthusiastically waved at the blushing pink Pokémon. Audino shyly tilted its head and returned an equally cheerful smile, its demeanor soft and warm. It seems to like you, Johan, Nurse Joy remarked with a chuckle. Johan laughed. It seems like everyone likes me a little too early. By now, Johan was used to being recognized by the Joy family across regions. He had long suspected that they had a private group chat titled Joy worldwide. As usual, after a brief conversation, Nurse Joy requested a signature and a photo. Jengar is in your hands, Nurse Joy, Johan said with a smile. Although Jengar had insisted it felt fine after its first attempt at Mega Evolution, Johan wanted to ensure there were no adverse effects. Moreover, staying in the Pokémon Center felt safer than staying at Sycamore's research facility. Johan had a hunch that Jengar might redecorate the lab's facilities overnight. While Jengar was undergoing its checkup, Johan sat in the lounge, sipping on coffee brought by Adino. "Thank you," Johan said, nodding in gratitude. Nurse Joy approached and casually asked, "Johan, are you in Kalos to challenge the Kalos League?" Johan blinked in surprise, a wry smile crossing his face. "No, I'm just here for the ice sculpture competition in Snowbell City." He wasn't like Ash, running off to each region to start anew, catching and training Pokémon from scratch. Oh, the ice sculpture competition. Their conversation drifted to casual topics until a news broadcast caught Johan's attention. On the television, Lysandra appeared, dressed in his signature black attire. Beside him stood a regal Pyroar as reporters swarmed him for interviews. He declared, "The latest invention from Lysandra Labs, the Holocaster, will be available to the public soon." The reporter conducting the interview was none other than Malva, one of Kalos' Elite Four and a news anchor known for her sharp wit. "He's changed a lot," Nurse Joy observed. "But Lysandra is such a kind person." She recounted how Lysandra had once provided aid to struggling communities and Pokémon in need, a kindness she had witnessed firsthand. "Kind, huh?" Johan mused, choosing not to comment. Lysandra's transformation wasn't just physical. His worldview had shifted dramatically. Still, Joy's comment gave Johan an idea. Lysandra's descent into extremism stemmed from the ingratitude of those he helped, people who exploited his generosity without remorse. This disillusionment painted the world in a survivor's bias, leading him to focus solely on its flaws. But the truth was, countless others genuinely appreciated and respected him. Perhaps this angle could be a way to reason with Lysandra in the future. "Johan," Nurse Joy's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Jengar's checkup is complete." She handed over the report with a warm smile. Jengar is exceptionally well-trained. Its stats far exceed the standard benchmarks for its species. Truly remarkable. Kaka. Jengar, now back at Johan's side, stood with its arms crossed, a smug grin plastered across its face. However, Nurse Joy added, "That said, it's a bit drained from overexertion. I recommend at least a day of rest." Johan sighed and gave Jengar a pointed look. "Hear that? Rest. Kaka." Jengar scratched the back of its head sheepishly, disappointed that it wouldn't be ruling Lumiose underworld that night. The next morning, Johan woke to the familiar sensation of Jengar licking his face, a routine that, surprisingly, he no longer found annoying. Sitting up, he ruffled Vulpix's fur, earning a soft "oh" from the sleepy Pokémon as it pouted and tried to fix its disheveled coat. Nearby, Cubfu snored softly, drooling as it dreamed of training. Even in its sleep, its little arms moved in a push-up motion. "Dragonair," Johan called out as he headed to the bathroom. "Wake up, Cubfu, and get ready. We're heading out." Dra! A soft hum and a tiny jolt of electricity later, Cubfu startled awake, its nose bubble popping with a loud plop. As the team assembled, Tinkaton proudly presented Johan with a gleaming gold monocle. "You made this?" Johan asked, impressed. "Cha-cha." The monocle wasn't just stylish. It featured a fine gold chain with a slot at the end designed to hold the keystone securely. It was functional and sophisticated, a perfect blend of utility and charm. Dressed in a black suit, monocle in place, Johan's appearance blended seamlessly with Kalos' romantic atmosphere. When he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror, he muttered, "Looks like I'm one trench coat away from being a classic villain." After breakfast at the Pokémon Center, Johan strolled into a nearby cafe to meet Sycamore. When the professor saw Johan, he paused for a moment before laughing. "That look suits you, Johan." The two shared a cup of coffee before heading toward their destination, the Coffee Manor. The Coffee Manor, located in eastern Lumiose City, The Coffee Manor was an old estate with a storied history. Sycamore explained, this manor is run by an elderly couple who taken stray or abandoned Pokémon. Over the years, it's become a haven, akin to a daycare, but with a twist. The Pokémon here weren't trained for battles. Instead, they were taught life skills: cooking, cleaning, brewing coffee, and even gardening. Many Kalos cafes source their staff from this manor, giving the Pokémon fulfilling roles outside of combat. I recruited several of my own Pokémon helpers from here, Sycamore added. Soon, their taxi pulled up to the grand gates of the Coffee Manor. Standing at the entrance was an NDD, bowing politely, as if it had been expecting them. DD. The NDD, standing at the gate, had upward-facing horns, its purple and black coloration giving it an air of elegance. Its half-open eyes exuded a blend of cuteness and seriousness. Clearly, this was a male NDD, known as the emotion Pokémon. NDD thrives on positive emotions, often lending its abilities to assist humans and Pokémon alike. In the Galar region, they're typically partnered with Nurse Joy in Pokémon centers, though they can be found in other regions too. Thanks for helping us, NDD, Professor Sycamore said with a smile. DD. The NDD responded with a polite bow, folding its hands neatly as it guided Johan and Sycamore into the estate. As they passed through the gates into the front yard, Johan couldn't help but marvel at the scenery. Even in late autumn, the estate remained lush with greenery. White cobblestone paths stretched between perfectly symmetrical rows of trees and bushes, with not a single stray leaf on the ground. Hidden among the flowers and shrubs, Johan spotted several Pokémon peeking out shyly to observe the visitors. Scatterbug, Vivillon, Flababy, and Aromatisse all curiously eyed newcomers. Johan adjusted his monocle and shot a warning glance at the shadow where his Gengar was lurking. Behave yourself. Although mischievous by nature, Gengar understood Johan's expectations. It only peeked out slightly, greeting the Pokémon with cheerful waves. The NDD at the lead lightly twitched its horns, as if sensing the emotional states of Johan, his Vulpix, and Gengar. Whatever it perceived made its expression soften noticeably. Passing a central fountain, several ducklet hurriedly waddled into the water with nervous splashes. This estate rivals Stephen's mansion, Johan murmured to himself. Professor Sycamore chuckled, noticing Johan's reaction. It's impressive, isn't it? I was equally stunned my first time here. But don't worry, the owners are incredibly kind. Johan nodded. The sheer size and upkeep of the estate suggested considerable wealth. Yet the couple who owned it seemed to dedicate their resources selflessly to caring for Pokémon. NDD led them past the main building and into the backyard, where Johan spotted an elderly man tilling the soil and an older woman knitting peacefully on a chair. DD. The NDD called out softly, catching the attention of the couple. You're here, the man said warmly, wiping sweat from his brow. Mr. Coffee, Mrs. Coffee, Sycamore greeted them with familiarity, smiling. Few people knew the couple's actual names. Even Sycamore addressed them as Mr. and Mrs. Coffee. The nickname, derived from their shared passion for coffee cultivation, suited them well. Welcome, Mrs. Coffee said with a gentle smile. This is Johan, a teacher and cafe owner, Sycamore introduced. Johan bowed, slightly in greeting. Mr. and Mrs. Coffee, it's a pleasure to meet you. I run a small cafe alongside my teaching work, but due to my schedule, I've been struggling to manage both. Sit, Mrs. Coffee interrupted kindly. There's no need to stand on formality. Another NDD approached, carrying trays with 2 cups of coffee and small plates of cake. This NDD, a female with downward-facing horns, had a calm demeanor and a soft, comforting smile. DD, as Johan and Sycamore sat, Vulpix sniffed curiously at the 2 NDDs. Ooh. Though they looked similar, Vulpix seemed fascinated by their subtle differences. Caca. Gengar popped out from Johan's shadow, waving amicably. Today, it was unusually well-behaved, a fact that didn't escape Johan's notice. Receiving permission from the coffee couple, Johan released the rest of his Pokémon from their Pokeballs. Feel free to play, Johan said, adding a quick reminder, but be on your best behavior. The female NDD brought snacks for the Pokémon, who quickly warmed up to her. A taste of perfection. Try the coffee, Mr. Coffee said, gesturing to their cups. Johan and Sycamore exchanged a glance before lifting their mugs. The rich aroma hit Johan first, a blend of chocolate bitterness with a hint of citrusy acidity. The flavor was smooth and velvety, with a lingering sweetness that bloomed on the palate. Delicious, Sycamore said, smacking his lips appreciatively. It's the best coffee I've ever had, Johan admitted. Mr. Coffee beamed. We grow and roast the beans ourselves. I'm glad you enjoy it. Johan's thoughts wandered. Perhaps he could source beans directly from the coffee couple for his cafe. Try the cake, too, Mrs. Coffee encouraged. Johan's plate held a slice of chocolate mousse cake, while Sycamore had a slice of cheesecake. Both looked exquisite, and the taste did not disappoint. Did the NDDs make these? Sycamore asked curiously. Not these two, Mr. Coffee replied, smiling mysteriously. Johan followed their gazes toward a window, where two more NDDs peeked out, a bold older sister and a shy younger brother. There are 4 NDDs here, Johan murmured in surprise. Mrs. Coffee explained that the siblings were rescued during a trip to Galar, where they had been bullied by a group of Thievul and Nickit. The siblings were brought back to Kalos, where they flourished under the coffee couple's care. The brother prepares coffee, and the sister bakes, Mr. Coffee said proudly. Johan was impressed by their story and their skills. What do you think of them, Johan? Mrs. Coffee asked. Johan hesitated, glancing at Sycamore. Weren't the coffee couple supposed to test him first? Seeing his confusion, Mrs. Coffee laughed. Sycamore speaks highly of you, and the NDDs already trust you. Their instincts never lie. NDD, known as the emotion Pokémon, could sense and evaluate a person's character with remarkable accuracy. Still, Johan wanted to ask the siblings directly. It's important to me that they want to join willingly, he said. The coffee couple exchanged approving glances. Good. But there's one thing you should know, Mr. Coffee added. These two cannot be captured in Pokeballs. They were likely stolen from poachers and escaped before being sold. Hearing this, Johan's expression darkened. Inside, Johan approached the NDDs. DD, the sister greeted warmly. DD, the brother peeked out shyly. Johan smiled gently, extending a hand with energy cubes. The sister took one immediately, savoring it with delight. The brother hesitated, eyeing Johan warily, until his sister grabbed another cube and stuffed it into his mouth. Tasty, right? Johan said with a grin. The brother's cheeks reddened as he nodded. Would you like to help at my cafe? Johan asked. The sister nodded enthusiastically, and though the brother was hesitant, he eventually agreed as well. Their skill sets surprised Johan further. The sister's hidden ability, Psychic Surge, created a psychic terrain, while the brother's synchronized trait allowed him to share status conditions. Such abilities would be invaluable for both cafe work and Johan's Pokémon therapy services. With the siblings officially on board, Johan promised to return for them after his trip to Snowbell City. As he and Sycamore left the estate, the coffee couple watched fondly. They made a good choice, Mrs. Coffee said. I hear Johan is quite the trainer, Mr. Coffee added. The sister clenched her tiny fist determinedly. DD, she levitated fallen leaves and branches into a tidy pile, a testament to her impressive psychic power. Her brother, watching nervously, marveled at his sister's strength. The next day, Johan, Alan, and Professor Sycamore set off for Snowbell City. Originally, Johan had planned to go alone, but Professor Sycamore suggested they travel together, citing the ice sculpture competition as an event worth witnessing. Additionally, Sycamore wanted to collect more data on Gengar during the trip for his research. Naturally, Alan joined as the professor's assistant. Off to Snowbell City, Professor Sycamore exclaimed, sliding into the driver's seat of the Jeep and donning a pair of stylish sunglasses. Kaka, not to be outdone, Gengar pulled out a pair of sunglasses from its dimensional pocket and put them on. The two exchanged a glance before bursting into simultaneous laughter. Gengar took the passenger seat, while Johan sat in the back with Vulpix, accompanied by Alan. The Jeep smoothly rolled out of Lumio City. Having Professor Sycamore as the driver, that was a rarity the Pokémon world wouldn't often see. Johan, here's the information about the ice sculpture competition, Alan said enthusiastically, passing over a tablet. Includes the event details, the list of contestants selected by the organizers, and profiles of the judges. Johan accepted it with a puzzled expression. Contestant selection? Alan explained with a smile. The organizers screen participants based on their skills, achievements, and reputation. Naturally, Johan, you wouldn't need to worry about being eliminated, so you might not have noticed. Ah, that makes sense. Alan continued. I've identified a few contestants who are likely to be your strongest competition for the championship. Championship? Johan raised an eyebrow. Although he had confidence in Vulpix, aiming for the championship wasn't his main goal. He was here primarily because Vulpix wanted to participate, and he simply wanted to let it try. Winning wasn't a necessity. There would be prizes regardless of placement. However, as Johan reviewed the judges for the ice sculpture competition, he found himself raising an eyebrow in amusement. The judging panel consisted of Nurse Joy, Officer Jenny, Seabold of the Kalos Elite Four, Wolf Frick, the Snowbell City gym leader, and Adam, the mentor of Wallace, the Setopolis gym leader. With these five making up the panel, Johan couldn't help but think, why does this judging panel feel oddly familiar? He muttered under his breath. I wonder if the panel could be bribed? Alan tilted his head. Nothing, Johan replied quickly, shaking his head. Scrolling through the contestant list, Johan spotted several familiar names. Lorelei stood out at the top of the list. Known as the Ice Queen, she was destined to become Kanto's Ice-type Elite Four member. She was undoubtedly a strong contender for the championship. Further down, there was Candace, the future gym leader of Snowpoint City in Sinnoh. From Gaylor, there was Nessa. Wait, Nessa? Johan's mind conjured an image of a tall, striking woman with a deep tan and a fit, athletic physique. She was Sonia's close friend, a rising model, and would one day be known as the title beauty and the gym leader of Hulbury. It seemed her affinity for water types extended naturally to ice types. Finally, Johan saw another familiar name from the distant Paldea region, Grusha. Grusha, the future gym leader of Glacido Gym, was a skilled ice-type specialist. Johan recalled being surprised when he first encountered Grusha, having initially mistaken him for a girl due to his delicate features. Clearing his throat, Johan refocused. The contestant lineup was truly stellar. Between future Elite Four members and gym leaders, the competition promised to be intense. Thank you, Johan said, handing the tablet back to Alan. Alan's attention to detail was impressive, which made it all the more regrettable that he would one day be manipulated by Lysandra. You're welcome, Johan, Alan said with a slight blush. Johan, do you think you'll win? Sycamore asked from the front seat, turning around briefly to glance at him. Johan laughed softly, stroking Vulpix's fur. Ooh, Vulpix straightened confidently, its eyes gleaming with determination. Seeing Vulpix's resolve, Johan replied, If we give it our all, we might have a small chance. But then Johan froze, realizing something unusual. Sycamore was sitting in the passenger seat. Wait, who's driving? Kaka. Jengar grinned at him from the rearview mirror, hands firmly on the wheel. Jengar's driving? Johan's voice rose in disbelief. Sycamore chuckled. Jengar said it's great at driving, so I let it give it a try. Honestly, it's doing a fantastic job. And to Johan's surprise, the Jeep was indeed cruising smoothly. Let's just hope we reach Snowbell City without any surprises, Johan muttered. When they finally arrived in Snowbell City without incident, Johan couldn't help but marvel. Looks like our little Jengar is all grown up. Snowbell City, located in the northeastern corner of Kalos, was a snow-covered wonderland. The competition had transformed the town into a lively hub, brimming with tourists and vendors. The event itself was scheduled to begin at sunset on a scenic hill overlooking the city. Local lore spoke of how the setting sun cast a golden glow over the snowy landscape, creating a mesmerizing rainbow effect. Upon checking in at the competition venue, Johan was surprised to encounter Lorelei, seemingly waiting for him. "Johan," she greeted warmly, accompanied by her Jinx. Johan stiffened slightly at the sight of Jinx. Wasn't that Lorelei's overly confident smoochum? Lulu. Jinx cooed, waddling over to Vulpix with hearts in its eyes. Ooh. Vulpix recoiled, startled by Jinx's sudden enthusiasm. Seeing Vulpix's discomfort, Johan muttered, "It's Lorelei's smoochum. You met before." Ooh. Realizing the connection, Vulpix froze in disbelief. While it recognized traces of smoochum in Jinx's features, the transformation was jarring. Any thoughts Vulpix had about evolving into a Ninetales were promptly shelved. Fortunately, Jinx's affection stemmed from admiration, as Vulpix had always been a role model for it. "I see Jinx's attitude has improved," Johan noted. Lorelei nodded. "Thanks to you. Your advice to gather information on Jinx's cultural significance in Galar really helped." Johan felt a sense of pride. Helping Pokémon overcome their challenges was always rewarding. At that moment, a smooth, magnetic voice interrupted. "You must be Johan." A man wearing a black leather jacket, his hair resembling a lion's mane, and a kind smile approached. Lysandra, the representative. It was Lysandra, leader of Team Flare and a representative of the Lysandra Labs. Everyone present knew him, especially Professor Sycamore, who shared a seemingly friendly relationship with him. The crowd greeted him, and Lysandra responded with a polite smile, his gaze lingering a little longer on Johan and Alan. However, he didn't stay long. As one of the sponsors of the competition, he was busy. Before leaving, he invited Johan and the others to have coffee after the event. Johan initially considered declining, but recalling Diantha's earlier request, he decided to accept. Afterward, Lorelei suggested they check out the venue. Johan agreed, and the two entered the contestant area, while Sycamore and Alan went to greet others they knew. The competition was held on a snowy mountainside platform. The arena, which seemed to be a battle stage, was repurposed for the event. 3 sides were surrounded by spectator stands, while the backdrop was a towering, snow-covered mountain. At the center of the arena stood numerous identical stone pedestals, roughly 1 meter tall, each serving as a workstation for a contestant and their Pokémon to create their ice sculpture. On one side of the arena, a team of photographers was busy filming. A bronze-skinned girl stood near one pedestal, appearing distracted. "Would you like to take a break, Nessa?" one of the photographers suggested, noticing her lack of focus. "Oh, sure. I'm sorry," Nessa replied, bowing apologetically to the crew before jogging away. Her path inadvertently brought her near Johan and Lorelei. As she approached, she realized she might be intruding. Just as she was about to apologize, her light blue eyes lit up. "Are you Johan?" Seeing Nessa dressed so lightly in the cold, Johan resisted the urge to ask, "Aren't you cold?" Instead, he smiled and greeted her, "Hello, Nessa." "Ooh." Vulpix chirped with a wag of its tail. "You know me?" Nessa asked, surprised. "I've heard about you from Sonia," Johan replied casually. Sonia and Nessa were close friends, and Nessa nodded in understanding. She also realized Johan likely knew more about her than others did. For example, she knew from Sonia that Johan had defeated Mustard, the former champion of Galar, who had remained undefeated for 18 years. She also knew Sonia planned to attend school in Hoenn next year because of Johan. "Is something wrong? You seem distracted," Johan asked politely. Nessa hesitated, unsure how to begin, but remembering that Sonia had described Johan as an excellent psychologist, she decided to confide in him. Lorelei, noticing Nessa's hesitation, suggested, "Why don't we talk over some coffee?" The contestants had a dedicated lounge area stocked with coffee, a must-have in Kalos. Once in the lounge, Lorelei excused herself to get coffee, leaving Nessa with space to speak. Nessa explained her situation. Recently, she had lost a battle against what she considered her rival, Milo. The loss itself was frustrating enough, but Rose, the Galar Pokémon League chairman, had confronted her afterward. He told her she needed to choose between being a gym leader or a model, as balancing both roles might prevent her from achieving her full potential in either. Being a gym leader was still new to her, and she hadn't yet fully adapted to the role. Johan silently noted the timing. So this is during the events of Twilight Wings. He remembered that Nessa later vented her frustrations to Sonia, which is likely how she first heard of him. What do you think? Johan asked gently. Nessa hesitated. If she had the answer, she wouldn't have come to Kalos for a distraction. I don't know. No, I think you do, Johan replied, his voice calm and reassuring. Nessa looked up, confused. When their eyes met, she felt as though Johan could see directly into her soul, and it made her nervous. Johan smiled again and said, I had a student once. He's about your age and faced a similar, if not greater, dilemma. Nessa's curiosity was piqued. Johan stroked Vulpix's fur, gazing out the window as he continued. He's a skilled Pokémon trainer, but also the heir to a major company. His personal passion, though, is collecting stones. Of course, Johan was talking about Steven. He once asked me what he should do. What did you tell him? Nessa asked eagerly. I asked him to imagine giving up one or even both pursuits. Could he accept such an outcome? Johan turned to Nessa and smiled. Ask yourself, Nessa, could you give up being a model? The thought made Nessa instinctively shake her head. And what about being a gym leader? She shook her head again. Her goal was to become the strongest gym leader. See, you already have your answer, Johan said with a shrug. Nessa paused, processing his words. Or do you think you're not capable of excelling at both? Johan asked, raising an eyebrow. Am I capable? I'm just an ordinary person. Can I really do it? Nessa murmured. Everyone's just an ordinary person. With a flash of light, one of Johan's pokeballs opened. Kubfu appeared, clenching its tiny fists in determination. Ku. Its expression seemed to say, why not me? If others can, I can too. Even you're giving motivational speeches now. Johan muttered, glancing at Kubfu. Nessa couldn't help but laugh. It's adorable. Johan sighed, cradling Vulpix in one arm while lifting Kubfu by the scruff of its neck with the other. He carried them both out of the lounge, giving Nessa some space to think. As he left, he offered her one final piece of advice. Talk to your Pokémon. After all, you're in this together. Nessa didn't know how long she sat there, staring at her reflection in her coffee. Eventually, she let out a small sigh. By evening, the competition was ready to begin. Vulpix rested on Johan's lap while Jengar and Kubfu worked together to give it a final massage. Kaka, just have fun out there. Tonight, we'll conquer the world. Jengar cheered. Ku, strike fast, strike true. Kubfu added. Johan could only shake his head at their antics. Vulpix, however, appreciated their encouragement. When the time came, the participants entered the arena. Johan stood in line behind Nessa, who seemed less troubled than before, though not entirely at peace. Johan, Nessa said earnestly, after the competition, can we have a battle? Before Johan could reply, the host's booming voice announced her entrance, and she stepped into the arena to thunderous applause. Next, we welcome Johan from Rustboro City in the Hoenn region. Carrying Vulpix, Johan entered the arena to enthusiastic cheers. Though startled by the attention, Vulpix took a deep breath and climbed onto Johan's shoulder. Its small voice called out to the crowd. Ooh! The competition began with a flourish. Together, Johan and Vulpix worked to carve their sculpture. Slowly but surely, an image emerged. Johan surrounded by his Pokémon. Vulpix in his arms, Jengar posing playfully, Dragonair soaring gracefully, Tinkaton wielding its mighty hammer, and Kubfu sleeping peacefully. In the sunset's light, the transparent ice sculpture reflected vibrant colors, bringing their creation to life. Above the arena, snowflakes began to fall. Articuno! A gasp came from the audience. It's really Articuno. The legendary Pokémon Articuno. To have an Articuno appear during the ice sculpture competition was unprecedented in the event's history. The crowd stood up collectively, gazing at the majestic figure gliding through the air, its movements summoning a light snowfall. Even the contestants stopped what they were doing to marvel at the sacred silhouette bathed in the golden hues of sunset. Lorelei's eyes sparkled as she admired the beauty of Articuno. Nessa, too, watched the legendary Pokémon in awe, feeling her worries dissolve like melting snow. Ooh! Vulpix tilted its head upward, its light blue eyes shimmering with wonder. So beautiful. Don't let it distract you, Johan reminded Vulpix. It's just Articuno. The crowd was stunned by his casual tone. Articuno, after all, is a mythical Pokémon. But Johan had seen Ho-Oh before, and that was while it carried a camera crew. Back then, even his Tinkaton nearly brought it down. Sure, Articuno was a legendary Pokémon, but members of its species weren't exactly unique. The one above them was likely just an ordinary Articuno, not one of the legendary trio. And besides, Johan thought, after seeing the Galarian birds, this one doesn't even compare to that ridiculous walking chicken. Vulpix nodded obediently and redirected its focus back to their sculpture. Johan, however, noticed something unusual. He reached into his pocket and felt a rainbow wing. The feather, which usually glimmered with vibrant hues, had grown dim. It's just Articuno, not Ho-Oh. What are you getting worked up over? Johan muttered under his breath, infusing his aura into the feather. The rainbow wing brightened immediately, returning to its resplendent state. Caw! The Articuno above seemed to notice something. It turned mid-flight and soared back toward the arena. It's coming back. Is it looking for something? A feather? Could it be one of its own feathers? Articuno surveyed the arena with a swift glance before locking its gaze on Johan and Vulpix. Under the astonished eyes of the audience, contestants, and judges, a snow-white feather floated gently from the sky, spiraling down to Johan and Vulpix. Ooh! Vulpix blinked, wrapping its 6 tails around the feather. As an ice-type Pokémon, Vulpix felt an unexpected chill emanating from the feather. Johan was taken aback. Was this feather drawn here by the rainbow wing? The Articuno's feather wasn't as fussy as the rainbow wing. It emitted a faint, soft glow. Its cold energy spread outward, but Vulpix quickly tucked it into the thick fur of its tail, suppressing the chill. The feather seemed to invigorate Vulpix as it shivered slightly, looking refreshed. Calm. Satisfied, Articuno nodded and flapped its wings powerfully, disappearing into the horizon. The audience erupted into chatter. Did Articuno choose them? It's a sign of recognition. That feather must be a blessing from Articuno. As the spectators marveled, some began to notice the nearly finished ice sculpture crafted by Johan and Vulpix. It's incredible. That looks just like them. It's so lifelike. The ice sculpture depicted Johan and his team in stunning detail. Every Pokémon, from Jengar's mischievous pose to Tinkaton's steadfast strength, looked alive. Even the smallest nuances of their personalities were perfectly captured. It's like they're real. Articuno must have been admiring this sculpture. Johan and Vulpix exchanged glances. So, do we still need to pull any strings? Johan joked. Well, in a way, they had already pulled a string, the rainbow wing. The feather in Johan's pocket seemed to shimmer faintly, as if acknowledging the thought. Vulpix, however, appeared a bit conflicted. It wasn't sure if the attention was truly for their efforts. Was their hard work being overshadowed by a single feather? Johan noticed Vulpix's unease. Carefully picking it up, he reassured it. No, this is just Articuno showing us recognition. The judges won't let a feather sway their judgment. Ooh, really? Of course, Johan smiled. This panel includes an elite 4-member. Do you think Articuno's presence would intimidate someone like Seabold? Johan added with a smirk. And there's also Wallace's mentor Adam. He's no pushover either. Besides, Johan said, giving Vulpix a confident look, have you considered that maybe our sculpture was already the best? Vulpix's eyes lit up. It had put in countless hours of practice, sculpting snowmen every day. With its innate talent and dedication, there was no reason to doubt its abilities. The judges unanimously agreed. Johan and Vulpix's sculpture was the best. Articuno's appearance may have brought attention, but the artwork's quality was undeniable. Other contestants had created extraordinary pieces. Lorelei and her Jinx sculpted a Lapras. Wulfric and his Walrein shaped an Altaria. Nessa and her polyper created a Milotic. Candace and her Sneasel depicted an Abomasnow. However, the complexity and detail of Johan and Vulpix's piece, featuring a trainer and 5 Pokémon, set it apart. Johan and Vulpix were awarded first place, receiving a Nevermelt Ice and a large batch of a Spear Berry sponsored by Lysandra Labs. But for Johan, the trophy was secondary. The real reward was Vulpix's newfound confidence. The little Pokémon finally realized it wasn't just any ice type, it was extraordinary. Second and third place went to Lorelei and Wulfric, respectively. Although Nessa didn't make the top 3, her experience, from meeting Johan to seeing Articuno, helped her find clarity in her goals. Congratulations, Johan. And Vulpix, too, Siebold said as he handed over the prizes. Thank you. Your sculpture was the most remarkable I've ever seen. Siebold added warmly. Ooh, Vulpix puffed out its chest proudly. Articuno's appearance turned the ice sculpture competition into a legendary event, becoming a hot topic throughout Snowbell City and the Kalos region. Afterward, Johan joined Lysandra for a coffee meeting. That night, Johan and Lysandra sat in a quiet cafe. The snow-covered streets of Snowbell City glistened under the moonlight. The two exchanged pleasantries, but refrained from diving straight into their agendas. Johan knew Lysandra's ideals well, thanks to his memories of another life. Similarly, Lysandra had researched Johan extensively through Diantha and Sycamore. After a prolonged silence, Lysandra finally spoke. May I call you Johan? Of course, Johan replied. What do you think of this world? Johan stroked Vulpix's fur as it purred contentedly. Beautiful, mysterious, and full of life, he answered. Lysandra's eyes narrowed slightly. Of course, Johan continued. There are imperfections, too. Things that could be better. This last remark struck a chord with Lysandra, who leaned forward, his tone more earnest. And if I told you there was a way to create a new, pure world, one without flaws? Not an easy feat, Johan replied. But if it were possible, Johan smiled faintly. Then why not try? This response pleased Lysandra, though Johan knew better. Lysandra wasn't someone easily swayed by a single conversation. Still, Johan decided to play along, using the opportunity to subtly steer the discussion. As they parted ways, Lysandra gifted Johan a TM for Dark Pulse. Standing outside the cafe, Johan stared at the TM in his hand, musing aloud. Maybe Giovanni would be better suited to deal with someone like Lysandra. After all, I'm too much of a nice guy for this. The biting cold wind blew under a velvet black sky as thick clouds obscured most of the moonlight. In the dim glow of the night, a shadow darted swiftly through the forest, heading straight for the Pokémon Center in Snowbell City. Inside a cozy, heated room, Kaka, the mischievous Jengar leaned over Johan's sleeping figure and unceremoniously ran its tongue across his face. MMPH. The familiar numbing sensation jolted Johan awake. He instinctively reached for the bedside table, rubbing his face groggily. Kaka. Jengar, ever the prankster, pulled a sherry berry out of its mouth and plopped it into Johan's hand. Crunch. Still half asleep, Johan sat up, squinting at his phone. 1:30 a.m. Jengar, what now? It's the middle of the night. Kaka. Kaka. But Jengar didn't waste time explaining. Instead, it tugged insistently at Johan's arm, urging him to get up. Recognizing the urgency in Jengar's actions, Johan quickly shook off his drowsiness. Although Jengar was often a troublemaker, it knew its limits. If it was waking him up like this, something serious must have happened. Johan glanced around the room. Aside from Vulpix curled up on his arm, none of his Pokémon were anywhere in sight. Something happened? Johan asked, a hint of tension creeping into his voice. Kaka. Jengar nodded emphatically. Johan sprang into action, swiftly throwing on his clothes and scooping up the still sleepy Vulpix. He followed Jengar, leaping out the window and landing in the snow. The icy air hit him like a slap to the face, instantly clearing the last remnants of sleep from his mind. Uwu, still half asleep, Vulpix opened its eyes and looked around in confusion. It quickly realized they were now in a snowy forest. Jengar floated ahead, motioning for Johan to follow. As they ran, Jengar explained the situation. Earlier, it had taken the rest of the team out for their usual nightly meet and greet, a playful way of asking local wild Pokémon for gifts. Everything was going fine until they stumbled across something unusual. A group of poachers, taking advantage of the recent influx of people in Snowbell City, had set their sights on a herd of Abomasnow. When Johan arrived at the scene, he found his other Pokémon hiding in a thicket, observing the situation in a nearby valley. The rustling of trees and occasional grunts echoed faintly through the forest. Tinkaton clutched its hammer tightly, glancing at Johan with determination. Cha! But Johan held up a hand, signaling for it to wait. Abomasnow, known as the Ice Monster, typically lived reclusively in snow-covered mountains, rarely venturing into human territory. Their peaceful existence made them prime targets for greedy poachers. Johan guessed the recent snowfall, brought on by Articuno's earlier appearance, had lured the Abomasnow out of hiding, making them vulnerable. Johan closed his eyes, focusing his aura. Aura expand. A wave of energy rippled outward, revealing the presence of several Abomasnow facing off against two poachers. The situation was tense. The poachers held a small Snover captive, using it as leverage to keep the larger Abomasnow at bay. Johan breathed a quiet sigh of relief. This wasn't an overwhelming force. It was just two poachers with their Pokémon, a Heatmore and a Bisharp. This might actually be manageable, Johan muttered. He quickly devised a plan and signaled his team to move into position. You'd better be careful with that Snover, said the taller of the two poachers. We need a live to sell, and we don't want these Abomasnow going berserk. Relax, the shorter one replied, tightening his grip on the struggling Snover. Let's just capture the rest of them before they get any ideas. Before the poachers could act, a sharp crack echoed through the forest as Kubfu slammed its fist into a nearby tree, snapping it clean in half. Who's there? Both poachers spun around, momentarily distracted. In that instant, Jengar materialized behind the shorter poacher, its menacing grin glowing faintly in the dark. Kaka! The poacher froze, terror coursing through his veins as a large boulder shot out of the bushes, slamming into Bisharp and knocking it backward. At the same time, Dragonair unleashed a torrent of water, sweeping Heatmore off its feet and dousing its flames. Uwu! Vulpix fired an ice beam, freezing the poacher and the captive Snover in a block of ice. The taller poacher barely had time to react before Johan appeared, landing a solid punch to his jaw. Thud! The poacher crumpled to the ground as Johan flexed his fist. All that martial arts practice finally paid off, he muttered with a grin. The defeated poacher groaned, reaching for another pokeball, but Jengar's leering face appeared before him. Kaka! The poacher's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed in a heap. With the immediate threat neutralized, Johan released the frozen Snover and handed it a few poke blocks to calm it down. The Abomasnow herd quickly gathered around, their leader embracing the rescued Snover. Go on, Johan said gently, watching as Snover nuzzled its mother. The Abomasnow leader stepped forward, bowing slightly in gratitude before retreating into the snowy woods with its herd. Before leaving, the Abomasnow left behind several gifts: berries, small chunks of ice, and crystalline snowflakes. Johan examined the icy crystals, recognizing them as fragments of Everstone, rare materials often used for evolution. They're such genuine creatures, Johan murmured, watching the Abomasnow disappear into the forest. Poachers like these don't deserve to exist. Not long after, Officer Jenny arrived on a snowmobile, flanked by a small team of officers. To Johan's surprise, she wasn't alone. Johan, meet Looker, she said, introducing the weary-looking man beside her. Hello, Johan. I'm Looker with the International Police. Johan raised an eyebrow, smirking slightly. Nice to meet you. I'm also a Looker. The detective froze for a moment before stammering. That's my code name. Despite the awkward exchange, Johan was well aware of Looker's reputation. Known for his relentless pursuit of justice, Looker had dismantled numerous criminal organizations, including remnants of Team Galactic and the Seven Sages of Team Plasma. I've been tracking these poachers for a while, Looker explained, glancing at the unconscious men. They're part of Argus Steel's crew, the airship thieves. Argus Steel? The name jogged Johan's memory. Wasn't that the father-daughter duo from Diancie and the Cocoon of Destruction? Johan handed the situation over to Looker and Officer Jenny, eager to avoid entangling himself further. Thanks for your help, Johan, Looker said sincerely. Don't mention it, Johan replied, gathering his team. We'll leave the rest to you. As they left, Jengar lingered for a moment, staring into the darkness. Kaka. Something in the shadows caught its attention. A faint green, cell-like entity watching silently. Unnoticed by all, the tiny green creature observed them with a mix of curiosity and recognition before vanishing into the night. 2 days later, on Thursday, under clear skies. Having wrapped up the ice sculpture contest, Johan did not linger in Snowbell City or even the Kalos region. After a brief stop in Lumio City to pick up the NDD siblings and exchange contact information with a coffee couple, Johan flew back to Rustboro City in the Hoenn region. From now on, all coffee beans for the Ray of Sunshine Cafe would be exclusively sourced from the coffee couple's estate. Thanks to their appreciation of Johan's character and their financial independence, the beans were offered at an exceptionally fair price. Today marked the first day back at home and the grand reopening of the cafe. Johan woke up to find Jengar sprawled on the ceiling, fast asleep. Even Jengar, it seemed, had wrapped itself in a blanket, though in this case, the blanket was a massive, tattered spell tag. There probably wasn't another Pokémon in the entire world who could boast such an oversized and peculiar sleeping companion. Relieved to see Jengar behaving for once, Johan let out a small sigh. The previous night, he dreamed of Mega Jengar punching Yveltal and stomping Groudon, a super scene that made him worry he might unconsciously yell, Jengar, Mega Evolve, in his sleep. Such a command might truly turn Jengar into a great demon king. After all, Mega Jengar's ability changes to Shadow Tag, a trait with significant tactical implications. Shadow Tag prevents all non-ghost-type Pokémon without this ability from fleeing or switching during battle. While not flashy on the surface, this ability synergizes perfectly with Jengar's combat style, much better than its usual curse body. Still, Johan couldn't help lamenting. Bring back Jengar's Levitate. If Mega Jengar ever went on a nighttime stroll, encountering it would be a nightmare for wild Pokémon. I want to flee, but I can't. Add Kubfu's opportunistic toll collector nature and Tinkaton's sticky fingers, and it wouldn't just be impossible to escape. Hiding possessions would be futile, too. The new unlawful trio would make their grand debut. Fortunately, Johan hadn't sleep-talked, and Jengar had remained unusually well-behaved for the night, likely drained from recent travels. Thinking about that night with the poachers, Johan couldn't help but praise Jengar and the others for their outstanding performance. If you guys could bust poachers every night, I'd have no reason to stop you from roaming around. However, Mega Evolution still required a tremendous amount of energy. Johan needed more practice, but finding someone experienced to learn from was difficult. Hardly anyone in the world even knew about Mega Evolution yet. Once Professor Sycamore's research progressed further, he planned to publish his findings. At that point, the era of Mega Evolution would officially dawn. Still, Johan had another lingering question. Mega Evolution, Dynamax, and Terrestrialization were all distinct transformations. They seemed incompatible and couldn't coexist. But what about Z-moves? Could they work alongside these transformations? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Shaking off these musings, Johan stretched and got out of bed. Pulling open the curtains, he was greeted by the chilly embrace of winter. Frost sparkled on the streets, and a hazy condensation fogged the windows. Though snow hadn't fallen, the growing chill hinted that it was only a matter of time. Stepping out of bed feels warmer than staying in, Johan muttered as he glanced at Vulpix. Vulpix, for its part, seemed oblivious to the fact that it was an ice-type Pokémon. Despite its natural resistance to cold, it loved burrowing under the covers at night. Since the ice sculpture contest, its confidence had soared. The feather from Articuno further bolstered its aura of frosty determination. Johan simply hoped the little fox's icy tail wouldn't freeze him completely before spring arrived. Ooh! Rubbing its eyes, Vulpix hopped off the bed and joined Johan by the window to enjoy the view. "You can take another nap if you want," Johan said with a smile, scratching its head. "Ooh!" The obedient fox nodded before curling back up. Downstairs, the house bustled to life as the rest of Johan's Pokémon woke up. Amid the activity, he turned his attention to the newest members of the household, the NDD siblings. The two had been given their own room as part of their employee benefits. Upon waking, the NDD siblings were already donning the new uniforms Johan had prepared for them, gifts he'd promised back in Snowbell City. Both siblings seemed delighted with their outfits, especially the sister, who twirled happily in front of the mirror. "Good morning," Johan greeted them. "NDD. NDD. Oh, /////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////// upstairs living quarters and the cafe downstairs. NDD's psychic powers made household chores a breeze. Brooms swept floors on their own. Cloths wiped windows effortlessly. Mops danced across the tiles as if enchanted. With 2 psychic Pokémon in the mix, the cafe was spotless in record time. Yet, Johan couldn't help noticing something peculiar. The sister's psychic power was leagues ahead of her brother's. In fact, Jengar and Vulpix privately confided to Johan that her psychic strength might even surpass Vulpix's. The realization left Johan slightly dazed. Another special case. He quickly dismissed the thought. Unlike his battle-ready Pokémon, the NDD siblings were here to work, not fight. Still, a fleeting idea crossed his mind. If I can't assemble a full team for the Indigo League, could I ask the sister to stand in? Of course, she wouldn't need to fight, just fill the 6th slot. Ultimately, Johan shook off the thought. The siblings already handled so much: baking, serving, cleaning, assisting with therapy. Better not push my luck, he sighed. After breakfast, the cafe reopened to a stream of curious customers. While some regulars were initially wary of the staff changes, their doubts vanished the moment they tasted the new coffee and pastries. Wow, this cake is amazing. The coffee tastes different, but just as good. I love it. Everything feels so fresh. Meanwhile, the NDD siblings became crowd favorites. Customers couldn't stop gushing. So cute. Can I hug them? They're absolutely adorable. As Johan watched the siblings handle their work with grace, he nodded in satisfaction. Outside in the backyard, Johan tended to his special radish seedlings. Kaka. Jengar crouched near the bed containing the spirit cloth soil, excitedly pointing at a sprout poking through the earth. Oh, on the frosty side, Vulpix carefully examined the snow-covered soil, spotting a tiny green nub barely peeking out. The radishes were sprouting, albeit slowly. But with a little help, such as adding the special snowballs gifted by the Abomasnow, growth would surely accelerate. It's working, Johan murmured. As his Pokémon busied themselves watering the plants, Johan couldn't help feeling proud of their efforts. Let's just hope no wild Pokémon comes along to ruin all this progress, he joked. Inwardly, however, he began contemplating ways to further enhance the crop's growth rate. Maybe I need a little help from a certain crown-wearing Pokémon. Far away, in Galar's Crown Tundra, a peculiar Pokémon resembling a white rabbit sneezed, rubbing its nose before settling back into a deep slumber. Kanaz City Pokémon Academy, Pokémon Psychology Consultation Room. Johan sipped his coffee while scrolling through the latest news, particularly articles related to poachers. At the same time, he continued answering questions from people seeking help with Pokémon psychology online. By now, Johan's reputation as an expert on Pokémon psychology was growing steadily. While not yet a world-renowned authority, he was undoubtedly gaining recognition. Common issues, in particular, had become second nature to him. Clang, clang, clang. A sudden noise drew his attention. Without looking, Johan knew the source, Tinkaton. The sound was identical to what he'd grown accustomed to hearing on the Isle of Armor when it hammered away at Corviknight feathers every day. Turning toward the noise, Johan's suspicions were confirmed. In the corner, Tinkaton was crouched over its hammer, tinkering with something. Beneath the massive mallet lay several smooth, sharp blades. What caught Johan's eye was how easily the blades, made of some unknown material, bent and deformed under Tinkaton's hammer. Wait, Johan blinked, his brain catching up. Are those Bisharp's blades? When had Tinkaton gotten those? Piecing it together, Johan remembered that one of the poachers they encountered in Snowbell City had owned a Bisharp. Nearby, Jengar cheerfully pulled another blade from its mouth and handed it to Tinkaton. Ka-ka. Tinkaton wiped its forehead with a tiny hand and gave Jengar an appreciative nod. The two were getting along swimmingly. It became clear that during the chaos, Jengar must have swapped Tinkaton's ability and stealthily pocketed Bisharp's blades. Johan silently mourned Bisharp's misfortune for about 3 seconds. Knock, knock. A knock on the door broke his train of thought, followed by someone entering without waiting for an invitation. Johan. It was Steven, his face adorned with a friendly smile. Congratulations on winning the ice sculpture contest. Kubfu, who had been dozing on a single-seater couch, jolted awake. Sensing an opportunity, it leaped to its feet, planted itself in Steven's path, and struck a battle-ready pose. Ku, halt! This path is mine to guard. Steven. Johan pinched the bridge of his nose, exasperation evident. He walked over, grabbed Kubfu by the thick fur on its back, and gently moved it aside. Steven watched, dumbfounded, as Johan effortlessly lifted the sturdy little Pokémon with one hand. The rumors were true. Johan really was a top-tier martial artist. No wonder Hoen's Elite Four member, Bruno, had invited him to spar. This is one of my students, Johan explained, giving Kubfu a meaningful look. Realizing its mistake, Kubfu bowed apologetically to Steven. My sincerest apologies. Turning back to Johan, Kubfu's eyes sparkled with admiration. Its trainer wasn't just talented, he was nurturing students left and right. Surely, greatness was all but assured. Johan was that. He's been listening to too many stories about ancient warlords. Johan replied offhandedly. Recently, not just Kubfu, but the entire group, including Jengar, had grown obsessed with Johan's nightly storytelling sessions. Johan waved dismissively. Don't mind him. It's his first time in the consultation room. Steven nodded in understanding, though he couldn't help but feel curious about the new addition. By the way, how's your Lily doing? Johan asked, changing the subject. Steven's expression softened into a smile. Thanks to your guidance, it's slowly adjusting to its new environment and has started training. That's great to hear, Johan replied. Reviving ancient Pokémon and helping them adapt to modern life was no easy task. Coffee, Johan offered. No thanks. Steven shook his head, suddenly remembering the real reason for his visit. He explained that he wasn't there for himself, but on behalf of a family friend, specifically an old associate of his father. Who is it? Johan asked. Steven elaborated. The family in question, the Parks, had a Pokémon suffering from a unique issue. It had stopped sleeping altogether, day or night, causing considerable distress in the household. After seeking help from various sources, they eventually turned to Steven, who immediately thought of Johan. A Pokémon that doesn't sleep? Johan rubbed his chin thoughtfully. This was definitely solvable. After all, whether through hypnosis, soothing techniques, or other methods, Johan, or even Jengar and Vulpix, could handle most sleepless Pokémon. If push came to shove, Tinkaton's hammer would surely provide a permanent solution. Still, Johan asked, what kind of Pokémon are we dealing with? Hypno. Johan froze. What? Hypno, known as the half-awake Pokémon, was a psychic type with a taper-like appearance. It spent most of its time dozing and was known for feeding on the dreams of humans and Pokémon alike. Given its sleepy nature, a sleepless Hypno was as concerning as it was baffling. Sitting in Steven's car en route to the park's rural home, Johan reviewed what he knew about Hypno. Stephen also provided some context about the Parks family. The family patriarch, Mr. Ben Parks, had worked alongside Stephen's father, Joseph Stone, during Devon Corporation's early days. As one of the company's major shareholders, Mr. Parks had played a crucial role in its foundation. However, 10 years ago, he had retired from corporate life to enjoy a quiet existence on a small farm outside Rustboro City. Their house came into view, a cozy wooden cabin nestled among snowy hills. As the car pulled up, a pair of elderly figures emerged to greet them. Standing beside Mr. Parks were several Pokémon. A Haxorus and Darmanitan flanked him, exuding a quiet but imposing presence. Meanwhile, his wife, Mrs. Shannon Parks, was accompanied by an Ariados, Charjabug, Joltik, and Farfetch'd. The couple warmly welcomed Johan and Stephen, leading them inside the cabin. The interior was cozy, warmed by a mad cargo nestled within the hearth. Mr. Parks explained Hypno's situation in detail, his voice tinged with concern. Mrs. Parks looked equally worried. "Can I see it?" Johan asked. The couple led him upstairs to a closed door, warning him to be cautious. "It's been irritable from lack of sleep," Mr. Parks said. "No problem," Johan reassured them, smiling as he placed a calming hand on the door. He opened it slowly. Inside, a Hypno hovered midair, surrounded by thick black smoke that twisted and churned like a living nightmare. Johan froze. The smoke's shifting shapes looked unsettlingly familiar. Hypno noticed them and turned sharply, its bloodshot eyes glowing with fury. The smoke around it surged violently. Jengar stepped forward, flashing its signature grin. "Kaka, want to experience true terror?"
Hello, everyone! As we wrap up this video, I want to share a quick note. I have a Patreon account. If you'd like to support me and enjoy on-demand audiobooks, you can become a Patreon member. Alternatively, you can check out my Google Drive link, which has 500-plus novel audiobooks available through my Ko-fi or Patreon shop. I appreciate your support.